Oh. Nothing. It's just that the person who taught me this technique seems to call himself a great monarch. Well, that's it. Song Tian snorted in disdain. Listen to his nonsense. This old man is too much. Junior brother, are you going to return to the human race with me? Junior brother? Song Tian said heroically, you're the only one in the world who can reach this point. Your path of invincibility is clearly still lacking, and your strength hasn't reached the extreme. Obviously, you embarked on this path later than me. If you're not my junior brother, what are you? With a thought, Han Fei recognized the first human emperor as his senior brother. This was a little beyond his expectations. However, this was good. He could take the opportunity to enter the human race. He didn't know anything about this chaotic era, not even the cultivation system of this era. Besides, Song Tian was right. Just now, he couldn't completely block Song Tian's a single punch with 3 punches. The other party's path of invincibility was clearly one level higher than his. Besides, Han Fei was sure that Song Tian didn't have double spiritual heritages. If he didn't have double spiritual heritages, they were both peak level great monarchs, and the other party's combat power had surpassed his. What did this mean? It meant that, as Song Tian said, he hadn't reached the peak of this path yet. He had thought that 800,000 points of basic combat power was already the limit of the great monarch realm, but he never expected that there was still room for improvement. However, he didn't know how to improve at all. However, Song Tian knew, so it seemed that this trip to the human race was imperative. Song Tian was straightforward. As if he had completely forgotten the tit for tat just now, he turned around and said to the other strong masters of the human race, okay, as you can see, Wang Han and I are from the same sect and he is genuinely my junior brother. I can't be wrong about this. We will be family in the future. The human powerhouses were all smiling again. Since this person was the human emperor's junior brother, that was great. A man laughed and said, I was wondering why a person who can compete with our emperor suddenly appeared in this world. It turns out that we are all family. A woman cupped her fists. Master Wang Han, have you mastered the law of life? Han Fei nodded. Yes. Song Tian couldn't help but look at Han Fei. I'm afraid you haven't just mastered the law of life. I also sensed the law of time just now. Obviously. You also cultivate your wife's Tao. What a pity. Although you're a genius, I've already taken the position of human emperor. There's nothing left for you. Ha ha ha. If you want, you can call yourself the human king. If you don't, it's up to you. However, you are a human after all. You should return to the human race. Han Fei smiled and said, since senior brother has already become the human emperor, why should I compete for it? As for the human king, forget it. I'll just be an idle human. My wife and I haven't come out of seclusion for long. So there are many things here that we don't know yet. We still need some time to adapt. In other words, Han Fei despised the identity of the human king. He was the human emperor in the first place, so he was certainly not interested in this title a level lower. Song Tian waved his hand. It doesn't matter. Our human race is the #1 race in the chaos. Except for those that haven't been investigated, our human race has basically recorded everything else. If you want to know anything, Just come back to the human race with me. Oh? Han Fei and Shiman Linglan looked at each other. Sure enough, what a coincidence. They didn't expect that they would start like this when they just entered the chaotic era. Everyone immediately became harmonious. Only then did Han Fei ask, "Why did you fight those demon plants, senior brothers?" Song Tian waved his hand. "Speaking of which, I feel unlucky. I heard that 9 peerless Dao seeds were born in the demon plant race. I thought it wouldn't be a problem for me to ask for a few, right? However, those guys refused. When have I ever been disobeyed like this?" While they didn't pay attention, I snatched a few back. Who knew that these B** stards would be so stupid as to chase me all the way here? I just wanted to ask for something. How could I expect to encounter this? I clearly didn't bring enough people with me. When I return this time, I'll immediately send troops to wipe them out. Han Fei. Shiman Linglan. Han Fei couldn't have felt worse. He didn't know how this guy had survived. Until now. Those Dao seeds didn't belong to you. Wasn't it normal for them to refuse to give them to you? Now he had snatched their things and even wanted to wipe them out. Even he couldn't be so unreasonable. The corners of Han Fei's mouth twitched. Indeed. However, it's not necessary to wipe them out. I see that these people are not weak. Why don't we subdue them? Wouldn't it be better if we take these strong masters under our command? Haha. I just said it in a fit of anger. How can I really kill them all? In fact, it's fake that I went to ask for things this time. I went over to ask them to surrender, but they refused. So of course, I can't give them face. With that said, Song Tian took out a small tree the size of his palm, which was shining with green light. Then he threw it to Han Fei. Han Fei was puzzled. What is this? Song Tian said carelessly, "This is the peerless Dao seed I snatched from the demon plants. This thing doesn't have much use to our human race." I see that. You have a lot of cultivation techniques. I'll give you one to play with as a gift. Thank you, senior brother. He couldn't help but think, who said that the human race couldn't use this? If this thing was given to Luo Xiaobai, she would definitely be able to use it. Seeing Han Fei put it away, Song Tian beckoned, "Let's go. Let's talk while walking." After a while, everyone crossed the starry sky. Song Tian said, "Hey, junior brother, I don't think you have any decent treasures. Did you not bring out the treasures, or do you not have any treasures at all?" Han Fei thought to himself, "I have many treasures. Who knows why I can't take them out now?" Han Fei smiled casually. "I have a knife. As for other treasures, I don't have any. I mainly focus on cultivation itself, so I didn't bother to find any treasures." Song Tian said earnestly, "That won't do. You need treasures. At least you should have a decent weapon. It's not that your knife is bad, but in terms of quality, it's still much inferior to a real supreme nature treasure. If you don't have one, I'll give you one later." Well. How can I accept this? Hey. It's just a weapon. I don't like that weapon very much. It's not very handy to use and doesn't match my temperament. However, since you're not the human emperor, you shouldn't value image and temperament so much. That thing is suitable for you. Oh? Then I can take a look at it later. Hanfei couldn't help but be overjoyed. Is this the King first human emperor? He's simply too rich. He despised the creation blood Skyblade and said that he would give him something better? Then it must at least be a supreme nature treasure. After the Age of Doom. Oh, no, after the primordial era, supreme nature treasures could be counted on one hand. Here, according to Santian, they seem to be quite worthless. Of course, Hanfei knew that this was probably an illusion. After all, a supreme nature treasure was a treasure, comparable to a sea-quelling god-level treasure. It was impossible for it to be worthless. Otherwise, if everyone mastered a supreme nature treasure, wouldn't it be shocking? After that, Santian said, unfortunately, there aren't many humans who have awakened the great Tao of time. It can be said that there are very few of them. This kind of great Tao is too mysterious, so even our human race doesn't have any treasure suitable for your wife. However, this doesn't matter. In terms of finding treasures, no one in the world is better than me. Oh? As he spoke, he took out something that Hanfei was very familiar with. The vast ocean navigator? The corner of Hanfei's mouth twitched, and Shiman Linglan almost cried out. What was his a moment ago had now become someone else's. Hanfei didn't know how to describe this feeling. The needle of the vast ocean navigator spun, and Santian didn't notice the abnormality of Hanfei and Shiman Linglan. Instead, he just said, this way. Hanfei quietly followed them into the black hole, and in the blink of an eye, they appeared in another piece of sea of stars. Here, Santian finally took out a star map. This was the first time Hanfei had used the star sea boundary map, but Santian seemed to be quite familiar with it. It seemed that in the chaotic era, using the star sea boundary map seemed to be very common. Buzz. Walking out of the passage, in front of Hanfei and Shiman Linglan, a huge superstar finally appeared. Outside the superlarge star, there were even more huge superlarge stars. Like the sun and moon. Hanfei's heart stirred. Is this the original form of the sea realm? Santian smiled and said, have you ever been to the chaotic vast land? Hanfei shook his head slightly. I had never been here before, but these stars seem a little too big. Santian laughed. Of course. This is the only chaotic vast land that floated out of the chaotic mist in the sea of stars. This piece alone is comparable to tens of millions of layers of chaotic mist. In order to stay on the chaotic vast land, billions of races are fighting fiercely. As for our human race, our entire lineage is rooted here. We can be said to be the first race on this vast land. Santian said proudly, let's go. I'll take you back to our race. Although Hanfei really wanted to ask what the chaotic vast land was, it would seem too ignorant if he asked it directly, so he didn't ask. Anyway, if he went to the human race, he should be able to obtain a lot of information about the chaotic vast land. Hanfei was also curious. What was the difference between the sea realm in the chaotic era and the sea realm in the future? At this moment, the ominous hadn't appeared yet. Or perhaps it had appeared. But no one noticed it. Therefore, at this moment, there shouldn't be the shattered star sea outside the sea realm. After a while, when Hanfei and the others descended in the sea realm, which was the chaotic vast land, Hanfei felt completely unfamiliar. He scanned around with his perception and found that there were dangerous ravines everywhere. As far as he could see, countless places were still enveloped by some mist, and almost half of the area he perceived had not been explored. These places were either forbidden places or treasure troves. In some places, there was even divine light surrounding them, and strange phenomena were frequent. As for the ocean, he had seen some, but not much, less than 1/10 of the land. However, he found an area completely made of ice and snow. There were countless ice mountains there. If they were all melted, they should cover a portion of the land. At this moment, in Han Fei's perception, there were battles everywhere in the current sea realm. The creatures of all races, big and small, some were fighting, and some were exploring dangerous places. In short, it was extremely chaotic. Han Fei couldn't help but ask, the human race has been in the chaotic vast land for so long. Haven't they explored these dangerous places? Song Tian said casually, these places are not very meaningful to strong masters above the god of war level. Therefore, we might as well keep them as trial grounds for the little ones to explore slowly. As for those above the god of war level, they would certainly explore the chaotic Star Sea. I see. Another moment later, Han Fei roughly estimated that this was probably the location of the East Sea divine realm in the Sea Realm. This huge territory was mostly filled with human creatures, and the number of humans was beyond imagination. With a causal perception, there were a huge group of more than 1 trillion. Han Fei didn't know how many there were. In any case, in this territory, the number of creatures of the other races had clearly decreased, more than 10 times less than elsewhere. Besides, in the territory of the human race, although there were many battles of various sizes, most of them were the human race's own battles. The outsiders were clearly very reserved here and didn't dare to attack randomly. Buzz. Suddenly, Han Fei had a strange feeling, as if he had been seen through a Dominator-level powerhouse? Han Fei's heart stirred. Anyone who could make him feel this way was at least a Dominator. In other words, the human race at this moment had a Dominator. Since there was a Dominator, how could Song Tian be the human emperor? Was it because of his potential? This was the only possibility that Han Fei could guess. As a peak-level great monarch, Song Tian could already unleash the combat power of the sea-quelling god level. If he transcended the supreme divine technique, he could never be underestimated. Besides, Han Fei believed that Song Tian definitely had transcended the supreme divine technique. Otherwise, with his current strength, it was impossible for him to rule all races. Swish. 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 The core of the human race was a place where tens of thousands of rivers converged against the Sunshine Mountains. This place gathered sea land and mountain quartz, and was full of spiritual energy. Treasure medicine gardens could be seen everywhere, and there were countless strange beasts. In the place where the river converged, a 9-headed flood dragon lay lazily, enjoying the impact of the water currents. In the mountain range, a divine rock stood proudly at the top of the mountain. In the sea, there were demonic octopus guarding the sea, and dragon turtles lying dormant on the coast. At the core, the goddess was sitting on the back of a tiger, holding a flute, looking at Han Fei and Shiman Linglan. Here, Han Fei had seen at least 3,000 gods. And this was only the core area. There were definitely many gods in other places of the human race. If these strong masters were gathered together, God knew how many there would be. In addition to these gods, a massive number of peak-level great monarchs were cultivating in seclusion. Many of these peak-level great monarchs should be able to become gods. However, in this era, they didn't seem to have a clear concept of gods, so they were still cultivating in seclusion. Some were trying to break through to the peak of the extreme Tao, and some were already at the peak of the extreme Tao, pursuing a higher level. In short, the humans Han Fei had seen were ridiculously strong. "Welcome back, Your Majesty." Some strong masters who were not cultivating shouted. However, they only shouted a few times and didn't continue. They didn't come up to ask questions. Only a few people, such as the goddess holding the flute, slowly came over on the tiger. The woman looked at Han Fei and Shiman Linglan and said indifferently, "Are there still our clansmen in the chaos?" Song Tian smiled and said, "Qing Ming, this is Wang Han, another successor of the first supreme, my junior brother. This is his wife, Shiman Linglan. She has comprehended the great Tao of time and her strength is extraordinary. Fortunately, we had the help of the two of them on this trip to the demon plant race. Otherwise, I would have been the only one who returned." "Oh? Does the first supreme have other descendants?" Qing Ming nodded at Han Fei and Shiman Linglan. "Thank you for your help. I am the guardian of the human race. I am in charge of the luck of the human race. You can call me Qing Ming." "Guardian of the human race? Does the human race have such a position?" Han Fei nodded slightly. This woman was very strong. Not only was she at the sea-quelling god level, but even her invisible suppressing pressure made Han Fei a little uncomfortable. "Nice to meet you." "Huh?" Qing Ming was slightly surprised. Han Fei's strength was only so, but he was so calm and lacked respect when facing her. Qing Ming looked at Shiman Linglan and found that Shiman Linglan seemed to be equally fearless. The way she looked at her was extremely indifferent and not special at all. Qing Ming frowned slightly and secretly pinched her fingers. However, as soon as she did it, the sky buzzed. She couldn't help but be a little surprised. It was just a glance, but it could trigger an astronomical change. However, Qing Ming still looked up, only to see that the brilliant luck was no weaker than Song Tian's. At this moment, Qing Ming couldn't help but be surprised. With such a body of luck, shouldn't he be another human emperor? However, as soon as the astronomical phenomenon appeared, it was eliminated by a certain power. Even she couldn't see the situation clearly. Song Tian said with a smile, "Qing Ming, there's no need to look. Just like me. Junior brother walks the path of invincibility and cultivates the supreme technique. He can also unleash a combat power above the god level. I've already sparred with him. There's no problem with his identity. Beifeng and the others have witnessed it with their own eyes." Immediately, the god-slaying level powerhouses around Song Tian also nodded. One of them said, "Master Guardian, we did witness that battle. Lord Wang Han is only slightly inferior to our emperor on the path of invincibility. They are almost evenly matched on the other aspects." "Oh?" Qing Ming took a deep look at Han Fei. Although she felt that it didn't make sense, if Song Tian had really confirmed this in person, this was more accurate than her directly judging Han Fei's luck, so she didn't ask further. Qing Ming said, "No wonder Master Prophet said that you would turn misfortune into auspiciousness on this trip, so we don't need reinforcements. In that case, please go see Master Prophet first. The human race has had another supreme powerhouse." You should meet him. Han Fei and Shiman Linglan naturally didn't have much to say. They were just waiting to read the history of the human race. However, this guardian seemed to have a lot of power in the human race. Even Songtian talked to her almost as an equal. Then what about the prophet? Han Fei had heard the term prophet more than once. He felt that the prophet and the first supreme seemed to be the top figures of the current human race. Songtian said, of course. I'm going to give those Dao seeds to the prophet. Junior brother, follow me. Since you've returned to the human race, you have to meet the prophet. Let's go. At the core of the human race, there was a divine tree. It wasn't that the tree was big, but it was actually only thousands of feet tall. Its leaves were shining and flowing with multicolored light. There were a lot of red fruits hanging on the tree. There was no telling what its use was. At the top of the tree, there was a sealed wooden door. It seemed broken, but perception couldn't penetrate it at all. Creak. The three of them came to the door, and Songtian was about to knock when the wooden door opened automatically. Come in. An ancient and hoarse voice came from the room, sounding indescribably ancient. Songtian said casually, Junior brother, let's come in. When Han Fei entered the wooden door, he thought that it was dark inside, but to his surprise, light shone through the top of the tree and illuminated the house, illuminating everything in the house clearly. This was a space thousands of meters long. It was not a small world, but was indeed made of the body of this tree. Furthermore, it seemed that there was more than this floor. As far as Han Fei could see, there were scrolls carved from divine wood. Some of these books floated in the air, and some were placed in the grids around the wall. In addition to these books, there were also some larger paintings, some bones, some strange stones, spiritual herbs, and a purple mist, which was the primordial purple chi. In every corner of the room, there were some strange things. Han Fei couldn't help but glance at Shiman Linglan, thinking that this prophet's hobby was too similar to the people of the Time Temple. They all liked to study all kinds of strange things. Prophet, I brought back a few of the peerless Dao seeds you wanted. Where do you think I should put them? Songtian casually said, and then kicked away a ball-like thing at his feet. Han Fei glanced at it, only to see that it was a divine persona. Han Fei was speechless. Good lord, how could he throw away a divine persona so easily? Shut up. You're making a fuss and making me irritable. Alas. This was the first time Han Fei had seen Songtian so obedient. He accepted the scolding as if he was already used to it. Clatter. Behind a stack of books, a tall, white-haired old man with a long beard and in a plain robe stood up. The old man glanced at Han Fei and Shiman Linglan and then looked at the sky. Where are the Dao seeds? Songtian casually took out 4 extraordinary peerless Dao seeds that were full of charm. Some looked like flowers, some looked like vines, and one of them even looked like a human. Faced with these peerless treasures, Songtian threw them to the old man indifferently and said lazily, I gave one of them to my junior brother. After all, this is the first time we've met. However, this doesn't seem to be useful. Those demon plants were so mad at me when I snatched them. Why do you want them? The old man took the Dao seeds and looked at it for dozens of seconds. What? Do you know? Go away. It's none of your business here. If the demon plant race comes to ask for them, How dare they come to my territory to ask for something? I'll kill them. Before the old man finished speaking, he was interrupted by Xangtian. The old man was so angry that he couldn't help but blow his beard. Do you think only you can fight? If anyone really comes to ask for these Dao seeds, just tell them to wait until I finish my research on them. Are we really not going to fight? Then wouldn't our human race lose face? The old man said angrily, get lost. You snatched their peerless Dao seeds. You already won. Xangtian muttered, you asked me to take them. Get lost. Xangtian patted Han Fei's shoulder and said, junior brother, sister-in-law. Just talk to this old man. When we're done, let's have a drink. Okay, senior brother. After Xangtian left, only Han Fei and Shiman Linglan were left here. Although this prophet didn't seem to have any heirs, Han Fei and Shiman Linglan both knew that this prophet was definitely a terrifying powerhouse. Here, they didn't even have any thought of attacking. The old man casually threw the Dao seeds to the ground and waved his hand. The countless divine wood books in the house began to automatically return to their positions. In the blink of an eye, the house was more than twice as clean. Of course, it was only relative that the house was still in chaos. The prophet, on the other hand, slowly walked to Han Fei and Shiman Linglan. With his hands behind his back, he walked around the two of them a few times, and then gradually became solemn. Finally, the prophet stopped wandering. He waved her hand, and a wooden mat appeared under Han Fei and Shiman Linglan's feet. A futon appeared in front of them. The old man had already sat down, and a long table automatically appeared in front of him. A teapot automatically poured out a 5-colored light, which fell into the cup and turned into misty tea. Alas! Take a seat. The prophet seemed to be sighing. Han Fei nodded and sat cross-legged. 2 cups that were emitting 5-colored light appeared in front of him. Drink. Han Fei didn't think it necessary for this old man to frame him and Shiman Linglan, so without hesitation, he picked up the cup and drank it in one gulp. Shiman Linglan wanted to take a small sip, but the tea in the cup completely turned into rays of light and disappeared into Shiman Linglan's body. Shiman Linglan's face changed slightly. She was about to speak when she heard him say, "It's okay. It's just something that cleanses the spiritual heritage, nourishes the flesh and soul, and improves one's basic talent. Your basic talent is a little low, so your strength is slightly weaker than the people of this era." Buzz. Han Fei and Shiman Linglan were both shocked and looked at the old man in front of them. The old man smiled. You don't have to be so surprised. It's impossible for 2 human emperors to appear at the same time in this world, but it can't be fake that the brilliant luck and the power of faith of the human race can enter your flesh and blood. Qingming can't tell, because she hasn't broken through to the supreme realm yet. Otherwise, the 2 of you would have been seen through just now. Han Fei took a deep breath. Master Prophet, you do have sharp eyes. The prophet looked at Han Fei with a smile and said, Master Human Emperor, I should praise your good methods. Not everyone can break through the time river and enter our era. It can even be said that no one has succeeded so far. But now, 2 of them have appeared here at once. Therefore, I should be the one who is surprised. However, I wonder why Master Human Emperor has spent so much effort to come to our era? Seeing that his identity had been seen through, Han Fei no longer hid it and said bluntly, Senior Prophet, to be honest, the two of us came from an era 10,000 years later. At that time, all the races in the Sea of Stars would probably be wiped out. Oh? The prophet narrowed her eyes slightly. I already know the strength of the two of you. You are both super powerhouses above the god level, which means that in your era, there are still top powerhouses. There should also be Supreme Realm powerhouses, right? Hanfei was puzzled. Senior Prophet, what is a Supreme? The prophet was also briefly stunned. You cultivate the Supreme technique. But you don't know what a Supreme is? Hanfei shook his head. Is there a connection between the Supreme technique and the Supreme technique? The prophet said, Supreme is the realm above the god level, which is your current realm. If you go one step further, you can reach the Supreme realm. Hanfei and Shiman Linglan looked at each other and breathed a sigh of relief. Then, they said, in our era, the names might be slightly different. We call a Supreme a Dominator. However, our enemy is an existence stronger than a Dominator. Oh? This time, it was the prophet's turn to be shocked. A creature stronger than a Supreme? Is there really such a realm? Hanfei looked solemn and then nodded heavily. There's only one such person. But that person is an enemy. And from the current chaotic era to our era, there has never been an existence above the Dominator level, which is to say, above the Supreme level. It seems that the old guy's guess is true. The prophet couldn't help but sigh, and Hanfei's face changed slightly. Han Fei couldn't help but ask, has someone already discovered the existence of the ominous? The ominous? The prophet looked at Hanfei and Xia Xiaochan. Is this the existence you mentioned? The prophet smiled faintly. I'm not talking about him, but the first Supreme. The guy who created the human race's Supreme technique. After that old guy reached the peak, he said that there was still a layer of mist above the Supreme level, so he gave up and embarked on a path of no return alone. As for the first Supreme, you can read his book yourselves later. Now tell me about the ominous. With that said, the prophet summoned the primordial purple chi and enveloped this place, using it as a barrier. Hanfei and Shiman Linglan couldn't help but exclaim in their hearts. How could he hide it from the heavenly Tao of this era? Reminded by the prophet, Hanfei did remember that when he returned to the Age of Doom where Shiman Linglan was, he couldn't even remember the floating stone. Therefore, what the prophet said was completely trustworthy. At this moment, although Hanfei had many questions, the ominous was the top priority. From the unification of the 6 lineages of the human race, to the appearance of the ominous, the collapse of the chaotic era, to the ominous return of the primordial era, to the Age of Gods, the Age of Doom, the Age of Sea, the Doomsday era. The prophet listened quietly without any change in his expression. After Han Fei finished speaking, the prophet finally nodded slightly. I didn't expect that I would be lucky enough to know the future. So, are you back to find a way to kill the ominous? Hanfei nodded. That's right. In the chaotic era, there were the most spiritual treasures in the world, and strong masters were everywhere. Here, we might be able to find a way to deal with the ominous. However, the prophet shook her head slightly. Master Human Emperor, the history that has happened can't be changed. No matter how you entered this era, even if the era acknowledges you, you are not a participant in this era. Unless you should have existed in this era. Now, you can only do 2 things in This era. Which two? The prophet said calmly. As a spectator, you can observe the current chaotic sea of stars and read any records to increase your understanding of this era. Han Fei's heart sank. What else? The prophet continued, cultivation. You can cultivate or even make a breakthrough in this era, but you can't steal the important things of this era, let alone participate in the battles of this era. Han Fei frowned. But we've already participated. Also, senior prophet. There's a history that I want to tell you. Oh? Tell me first. Han Fei immediately told her what happened after he returned to Yu City and met Shiman Linglan. At that time, he could be said to have changed the entire Yu City, Shiman Linglan, and countless people. However, after hearing this, the prophet just said calmly, because you should have been from that era in the first place. Secondly, even without you, Yu City would have changed. You said that you had become a fool, but have you ever thought that there might have been such a talented fool in that era, but you replaced him? Buzz. Han Fei and Shiman Linglan were both shocked, feeling a sense of fear and shock. Han Fei's heart trembled. If that was really the case, didn't it mean that Shiman Linglan should have fallen in love with another person, a person he replaced? Shiman Linglan didn't dare to imagine. If it weren't for Han Fei in the great wilderness village, would there be her now? Shiman Linglan asked, so we can't do anything here? Han Fei's eyes glittered. What way? Han Fei smiled bitterly. Such participation doesn't seem to mean much. However, the prophet shook her head and said, not necessarily. What if you parasitized Songtian? At that moment, Han Fei suddenly raised his head. The prophet's words stunned Han Fei. Han Fei didn't care if the prophet was testing him or not. Anyway, he had long been seen through. What else could he test him with? Besides, as the prophet said, even if he parasitized Songtian, he was essentially a bystander. However, this could be considered indirect participation in this era. Furthermore, this way of participation could avoid the greatest problem. Because according to the process of time, there was not much time left in the Doomsday Era. There were only 10,000 years left at most. Therefore, Han Fei knew that he couldn't stay in this era for long. Different from when he entered the Age of Doom, that period of time was intercepted by Jiang Linxian. It was a cycle of time. Therefore, that period of time had time acceleration, which was different from the normal flow of time. However, this time, he had returned to the chaotic era purely from the time river, so the flow of time hadn't changed. This also meant that staying in the chaotic era for 10,000 years didn't affect the flow of time in the Doomsday Era, so 10,000 years would also pass in the future. And once he could parasitize Songtian, he could leave the current time and step back into the chaotic era from another time. There was no need to stay long here. Therefore, Han Fei chose to agree immediately. This was his best choice. As if knowing that Han Fei would definitely agree, the prophet just nodded slightly. As a human prophet, this is the only thing I can help you with. But I have to remind you that even if you parasitized Songtian, his path might not be suitable for you. Even if you walk the same path, you have to be careful. Han Fei cupped his hands. Thank you, senior prophet. I understand. In that case, when should we start? The prophet smiled. When you leave. I think you still have a lot of things to learn. Han Fei nodded. Although he didn't have much time, he did need to know a lot. of things. The most important thing was the way to continue to practice the supreme divine technique. Han Fei said, Senior Prophet, in our era, the path after the peak of the Great Monarch realm, which is the peak of the war general level in your current era, was cut off. May I know how to make a breakthrough in the supreme divine technique? The prophet didn't speak either. Instead, he waved her hand and summoned 2 divine wood books. Read them first, and then read all the books in this room. If you have any questions, you can ask me. Han Fei nodded slightly. He was not in a hurry. It was already beyond his expectations that the human prophets of this era were willing to help him. Han Fei immediately opened a divine wood book, which contained some information recorded in Tao patterns. As Han Fei was immersed in it, the contents of the divine wood book were revealed to him one by one. This was just an ordinary book that recorded the various stages of cultivation and simple understanding of the chaotic era. It detailed the cultivation levels of the chaotic era. Compared to the cultivation system he had experienced, cultivators in the chaotic era started from the law enforcer realm, which was also called the first realm in mortal body. Therefore, strictly speaking, explorers were the real starting point of cultivation in the chaotic era. In other words, they didn't have a 4-9 minor heavenly tribulation. Explorers and venerables were respectively called the second realm in mortal body and the third realm in mortal body. Cultivators in the mortal body realm were collectively called mortals or mortal meridians. There were more and more such people, which meant that the chaotic era was transforming from an era of birth to an era of self-reproduction. The king realm, the sky-opening realm, and the monarch realm were called the 3 realms in spiritual body. Among them, the king realm was called the spiritual body soldier, the sky-opening realm was called the spiritual body warrior, and the monarch realm was called the spiritual body war general. The gods, the god-slaying level, and the sea-quelling god level corresponded to the 3 realms of the divine body. They were respectively called the war god level, the heavenly god level, and the super god level. And above the super god level was the supreme level. The human race had 2 supremes before. One was the first supreme, who was the person who laid the foundation of the human race. He was known as the first supreme because he had never met a worthy opponent. He had defeated all kinds of divine races born in the chaos. Naturally, he was the strongest in the chaotic sea of stars. No one could challenge his dignity. It wasn't until the first supreme found a path of no return in the sea of stars that he embarked on this path. Before he embarked on this path, he had once crossed it with his spiritual will only to fail. And this was the first defeat in his life. Therefore, he saw new hope and resolutely embarked on that path of no return. Furthermore, there were more than 30 people with him, all of whom were supremes. The other supreme of the human race was the prophet. The prophet had the ability to see through the heavenly secrets. As for the strength of the prophet, it was recorded in the divine wood scroll that he had once suppressed the 3 supreme level powerhouses of the lineage of strange beasts, demon plants, and ferocious beasts. Seeing this, Han Fei couldn't help but look up at the prophet, who just smiled. Han Fei couldn't help but suspect that this book was probably written by the prophet himself. If it were an arrogant person, he might have exaggerated his strength. However, the prophet was very steady and liked to study, so Han Fei felt that the records might have covered up his real combat power. So far, the human race hadn't had a third supreme. The human race had 2 supremes, and as for the 6 lineages, only the stillborn hadn't appeared. The remaining lineages all had supremes. As for the other races, there were more than 100 known supremes. However, nearly 30% of them followed the first supreme to embark on the path of no return and never returned. This was the end of the book. Han Fei couldn't help but sigh. There were a shocking number of dominators in the chaotic era. He had thought that Song Tian was already strong enough as the first human emperor, but he didn't expect that there were many strong masters stronger than him. Han Fei couldn't help but open the second Divine Wood book. This book completely depicted the first supreme. According to the book, when the first supreme was born, the world was still chaotic, and the chaos dominated the sea of stars. After 3 eras, a large number of divine races and a massive number of strong masters gradually appeared in the chaos. The first supreme fought from the chaos and never lost. 3 eras later, the first supreme drew the power of the world to activate the divine vine. From then on, the other 5 lineages were born one after another. Seeing this, Han Fei paused, because he found a shocking thing, which was that a great era had existed for billions of years. *CK, the first supreme had lived for so long? Besides, the other 5 lineages were actually nurtured by him. It felt like a person was too bored, so he nurtured 5 siblings. In the following 30 million years, purple light came from the east in the chaos. The various divine races discovered that such mist could evolve into creatures. Therefore, they all competed for the primordial purple light, so their respective lineages appeared. Because of the strength of the first supreme, the birth and development of the human race were extremely rapid. As for the supreme divine technique, it was a supreme-level cultivation. Technique comprehended by the first supreme-level cultivator with his own strength and the chaotic heavenly secrets. However, this technique was difficult. Since the day he created this technique, no one could complete the cultivation of the supreme technique. Most of them stopped at the war general level and exploded in the end. After countless years, countless people were still exploring this path. Han Fei even saw that there was no shortage of super god-level powerhouses. Namely, sea-quelling gods. They crippled their cultivation or reincarnated to recultivate. Starting from the mortal body realm, they moved forward step by step, trying to reach the peak in every realm. It was also during such exploration that people discovered that to reach the extreme of every realm, not only did it require potential, but also luck. 1. Had to have great luck to reach the extreme of every realm. However, even if someone reached the peak of every realm, they still failed at the peak of the war general level in the end. This was because they discovered that there were infinite possibilities in the war general level. Many people thought that they could reach the peak, but in the end, they stopped and couldn't advance further. In the end, because the supreme divine technique was too powerful, their bodies exploded and they died. After countless attempts, no one could break through the realm of the supreme divine technique, so fewer and fewer people began to practice this technique. However, because of the cultivation of the supreme technique, some people of the human race began to study the theory of luck, and a magical inheritance was born, which was the guardian of the human race. The guardian was said to be able to control the lives and luck of the human race. The position of the human emperor was proposed by the guardian. Sure enough, after the human emperor appeared, he had overcome all obstacles along the way. And Songtian didn't let them down. Although he hadn't broken through to the War General realm, he could already unleash super god-level combat power. This made many people see hope again, and Song Tian was also taken in as a disciple by the First Supreme. However, at this critical moment, the First Supreme actually led a group of Supremes into the path of no return. Seeing this, Han Fei couldn't help but wonder. Since Song Tian had the highest chance of breaking the taboo of the Supreme technique, why didn't the First Supreme leave before he made a breakthrough? Although Han Fei was puzzled, he still continued to read. On the day the First Supreme left, the chaotic vast land appeared. On it, purple gas soared like dragons, purple dragons circled, colorful streams of light, and myriad scenes appeared. People discovered that the chaotic vast land was simply perfect for the habitat of all creatures. It wasn't that there were no habitable stars in the vast sea of stars. However, not only was the chaotic vast land abnormally suitable for habitation, but it also had many resources, and the power of the vast land could regenerate many resources. As for the human race, they were the first race to live on the vast land of chaos. As the human races call to share the chaotic vast land with other races spread throughout the sea of stars, countless people came to find them. Now, on this chaotic vast land, there were tens of millions of creatures. Han Fei instinctively felt that there seemed to be something wrong with this part of history. After the First Supreme left, the chaotic vast land came out, attracting many forces. Although everything seemed normal, Han Fei felt that something was wrong. For example, why did the First Supreme leave? For example, why did the chaotic vast land appear at this moment? For example, why was the human race willing to share the chaotic vast land with the myriad races? Suddenly, Han Fei realized something. Senior Prophet, is the human race's plan to rule all races already underway? At some point, the Prophet had already begun to study the peerless Tao seed that he had thrown to the ground. Hearing Han Fei's words, he just nodded. Seeing this, Han Fei didn't disturb the Prophet. Instead, he checked the time. Recorded. It turned out that this unified plan had been quietly going on for hundreds of thousands of years. It turned out that the ancient human race ruled all races in this way. However, these things were recorded in the Divine Wood Book of the First Supreme. Obviously, it was intentional. In other words, the appearance of the chaotic vast land must be related to the departure of the First Supreme. What was it that made the First Supreme abandon his disciple and secretly let the human race rule the myriad races in the Sea of Stars? Could it be that the First Supreme knew that the ominous was coming? Unfortunately, there were no further records about this part. The last part of this volume was the First Supreme's elaboration and understanding of the Supreme technique. These elaborations and understanding were all cultivation methods such as swallowing stars and fusing with origin stars. However, Han Fei suddenly saw on one of the pages that the First Supreme once said, the mastery of the Supreme Divine Technique requires a cultivator to completely comprehend the profound meaning of the Supreme Divine Technique. Han Fei could understand that, because the Prophet had also said that the Supreme Technique was a supreme-level technique. However, there was another sentence recorded by the First Supreme, which was the parting words of the First Supreme to the Prophet. No one knows my loneliness. In the world, I am the only Supreme. Han Fei was stunned to see this. When the First Supreme left, he took away more than 30 Supremes. How could he be the only Supreme? Han Fei raised his head and wanted to ask the Prophet, but the old man seemed to be studying the peerless Tao seed attentively at the moment. Han Fei. thought to himself, forget it, I'd better finish reading this room of books first. Shiman Linglong looked at Han Fei as if asking what he had seen that could surprise him so many times. Han Fei handed over the Divine Wood book and said, read it first. With so many books, you might have gained a lot. 3 years later. When Han Fei closed the last book, he was finally relieved. He couldn't help rubbing his eyes. He had finally seen how terrifying the current chaotic era was. The current number of races exceeded hundreds of millions. These were only the known races. No one dared to say if there were still a lot of unknown races. But Han Fei thought there probably were. In the past 3 years, in addition to the development of the chaotic era and the battles of countless divine races, what Han Fei saw most was the so-called fundamental talent, the path of invincibility, and the history of the human race, such as the exploration of the supreme divine technique by countless people. Among them, the fundamental talent that the prophet mentioned was not the bloodline, but the way this person was born. The reason why so many supremes could be born in this era was mainly that these people were mostly born from the chaotic origin. They were creatures born naturally by the heavens and earth. These creatures often called themselves the divine race. Han Fei's bloodline was indeed very powerful, and his upper limit was actually extremely high. It could be said that in the future, almost no one could resist him. However, this was the chaotic era. There was a large group of creatures born from the chaos. Perhaps their bloodline level was not high enough, but they were born by the chaotic world. It could be said that they were born as extraordinary divine fetuses. However, Han Fei also discovered that because his bloodline was too strong, his basic talent was actually not much worse than the creatures born in the chaos. If there was a difference, one had an innate, perfected talent, and the other had a postnatal perfected talent. It was not difficult to make up for this lack. He just needed to absorb enough chaotic origin energy. The research records of the path of invincibility were what really attracted Han Fei. The path of invincibility was essentially not a law, but a state of mind. In the middle of the chaotic era, many strong masters who walked the path of invincibility appeared, but without exception, these strong masters were all taught a lesson by the First Supreme. However, their path of invincibility didn't collapse. The First Supreme didn't kill these people and deprive them of their path of invincibility. This was different from later generations, until Han Fei saw the records of the prophet's research on the path of invincibility. In the records, the path of invincibility was divided into 3 realms. The first was called Fearless Body. In this realm, one would seek invincibility in killing. This was Han Fei's current realm. This realm could be broken. The reason why? There was a saying that one could defeat a cultivator walking the path of invincibility and snatch his path was that once the path of invincibility was lost, the will of invincibility would be lost. And if he defeated a strong master walking the path of invincibility in the same realm, the winner would absorb the other party's invincible aura and strengthen the outburst of his invincible will. This would make the winner feel more and more invincible. Therefore, it created a feeling that the other party's path of invincibility could be absorbed. Therefore, the understanding of future generations of the path of invincibility was still at the first level. And the second realm was called the invincible body. This realm had to be built on the foundation of invincibility in the first realm. It meant that in The first realm, you couldn't be defeated by other cultivators on the path of invincibility. If you were defeated, it was impossible for you to reach the second realm. As for this realm, it meant that the enemy couldn't hit it at all, or couldn't hurt it. The second realm wouldn't increase one's strength, but this state of invincibility would make the enemy tremble in fear. Those who didn't know this Tao would only think that he was immune to both body and soul injuries. Therefore, on the basis of the second realm, the third realm appeared. The path of invincibility in the third realm referred to swallowing the sky and absorbing the earth, controlling the power of the heavens and earth, and refining a star domain. With a thought, one could obtain the power of a domain, maintain the invincible momentum, and greatly increase their strength. This was the realm reached by the first supreme, and also the highest realm. Known to be on the path of invincibility, but it might not be the highest realm on the path of invincibility. The first supreme had once guessed that if he could control the chaos, he would obtain the power of all Daos. Only then would he be truly invincible. Unfortunately, even the first supreme couldn't do this, so it only existed as a guess. After understanding the path of invincibility, Han Fei also understood the true meaning of the great Tao of life replacement. The so-called 3-second invincibility of the great Tao of life replacement was actually that in those 3 seconds, he had reached the second realm of the path of invincibility, the invincible body. And the way to comprehend power was to observe the world and comprehend the power of the world. It was simple to say, but not many people could do it. However, those who could still maintain the path of invincibility after being beaten by the first supreme had all done it. Santian had done it. As for the third level, it was not something Han Fei could master at the moment. Not to mention mastering it, his current perception couldn't even spread to a star domain. Therefore, all he could do now was to obtain the chaotic origin and comprehend the second level of the path of invincibility, borrowing the power of the world. It had to be said that too many things in the chaotic era had been lost. If no one guided him to comprehend the second level of the path of invincibility, God knew when he would be able to comprehend it. Han Fei had also learned something about the advancement of the Supreme Divine technique, but he needed to confirm it. Han Fei finally interrupted the prophet's research and said, "Senior prophet, did the first supreme leave because of Santian?" The prophet slowly put down the flowered Tao seed in her hand, looked up at Han Fei, and said with a smile, "You found it?" Han Fei said, "From all the records, I found that the first supreme seems to have a different view of supremes from others. He feels that supremes are unique. Only the strongest are worthy of being called supremes. Therefore, when he left, the chaotic vast land appeared, and all races came to submit to the human race. The purpose was to let Santian rule all races and cultivate the supreme heart. Therefore, in an era, only one person can transcend the supreme technique, right?" Hearing this, Shiman Linglan couldn't help but put down the book in her hand. "Directly from the great monarch realm to the strongest?" "Yes and no." The prophet said leisurely, "Your thinking is too narrow. Even if you comprehend the true profound meaning of the supreme technique, you might not be the strongest. Even if the first supreme leaves, his legend is still there. Just this legend is the inner demon of countless people. Whether he is there or not doesn't affect Santian from making breakthroughs. That's all I have to say. The rest is up to you to comprehend." Han Fei frowned. "Then why did the first supreme leave?" "Because of me." Han Fei and Shiman Linglan couldn't help but look at the prophet in shock. They never expected that the first supreme would leave because of this old man. Han Fei's heart stirred. How did he know that Song Tian could transcend the supreme technique? Suddenly, Han Fei shut up and looked at the prophet deeply. Yes, this person was known as the prophet. He had even foreseen the arrival of the ominous. He had probably foreseen the future of the sky. That was why the first supreme chose to leave. Shiman Linglan couldn't help but ask, Senior Prophet, can you foresee Wang Han's future? Han Fei's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't help but want to hear the prophecy. However, the prophet shook her head slightly. It's too vague. After all, you are not from this era. However, please go on. Han Fei and Shiman Linglan said in unison. The prophet looked at Han Fei. However, I can see that you carry the great luck of an era. A person like you has too many choices to make. You have to firm your choice, which is the best choice. That's it? Han Fei was stunned. The prophet smiled. That's it. Han Fei thought to himself, this is no different from not saying anything. The prophet asked, are you leaving after reading the book? Han Fei asked, Senior Prophet, I have one last question. Do you know the demon purification pot? The prophet took a deep look at Han Fei. No. Sure enough. Han Fei thought to himself, at this time, the demon purification pot shouldn't have appeared yet. Otherwise, with the ability of the prophet, he should have known. Besides, in this era, not only was there no demon purification pot, but there were also no 3 temples. Or rather, the 3 temples hadn't been established yet, and the human race didn't know about billions of races, so Han Fei didn't need to ask about these things. All in all, Han Fei had learned enough information. Han Fei cupped his fists. Senior Prophet, I have no more questions. Han Fei and Shiman Linglan had stayed in the prophet's residence for 3 years. The prophet had already informed Song Tian and Qing Ming and asked them to strictly block any news about Han Fei. At this moment, the prophet summoned the 2 of them and set up a barrier with the primordial purple qi, explaining their background and telling Song Tian about Han Fei's parasitizing. Before Song Tian said anything, Qing Ming's expression changed drastically. I don't agree. Master Prophet, Song Tian is the emperor of the human race. How can you let others take advantage of him? This time, Song Tian laughed. It doesn't matter. I will separate a part of the space in the soul sea. This part of Junior Brother's soul can only watch the memories during the parasitic period. He can't observe my soul. Han Fei couldn't help but exclaim. As expected of the first human emperor, his breadth of mind was worthy of praise. Qing Ming said with a sullen face, but this might affect your luck. Song Tian sneered. I am the dragon of luck of the human race. If I don't even dare to resist this trivial risk, how can I break through the supreme Tao? Han Fei smiled. Senior brother, you're not surprised at my real identity at all? The corners of Song Tian's mouth curled up into a confident smile. Since the battle with me, when I offered you to be the king of the human race, but you refused, I knew that you were not from this era. Otherwise, why would you have a super god-level powerhouse who walked the great Tao of time accompany you? I thought that I would have plenty of time to communicate with you in the future. I didn't expect you to stay in this era for so short a time. What a pity. Han Fei cupped his hands. Senior brother, you're indeed righteous. Song Tian sneered. Same to you. You don't even take me seriously. By the way, do you know my way out? Han Fei smiled. Aren't you afraid that this question will affect your state of mind? Ha ha ha. This is nothing. If I can't see through this, how can I be the human emperor? Whether I live or die, I can accept it. However, Han Fei shook his head slightly. To be honest, I don't know. Not to mention our era, there aren't many rumors about the chaotic era even in the primordial era. I really don't know where senior brother will go in the future. Of course, I can take a look. Song Tian shook his head. No trouble. It's fine if you don't know. It's not a big deal. Come on. In the next moment, a soul shadow walked out of Han Fei's body. Han Fei slashed out, severing the consciousness. Song Tian opened his mouth and swallowed this part of the soul body. The two of them acted decisively without any hesitation. Then, Song Tian smiled and said, Sister-in-law, do you want to go together? I'll save a seat for you. Shimin Linglan shook her head. Thank you. It's fine as long as Wang Han knows. If he knows, I know. Seeing this, Song Tian naturally wouldn't stand on ceremony with Shimin Linglan. Instead, he looked at Han Fei. Junior brother, let's go? Han Fei said, I might stay for a while, but I'll be in the chaotic mist. I don't think I'll come back. What a pity. Let's meet again someday. I hope that when we meet again, I can comprehend the second level of the path of invincibility. At that time, let's fight again. I won't let you down. With that, Han Fei looked at the prophet and cupped his hands. Senior, I'll take my leave first. The prophet just smiled and nodded without saying anything else. After a while, Han Fei and Shimin Linglan left the Sea Realm. In the prophet's residence, Qingming said with an ugly expression, Master. Prophet, I have no right to interfere in your decision. However, isn't this too hasty? The prophet smiled. Ming-Qing. Why don't you observe Song Tian's luck these days? The day you comprehend it will be the day you become a supreme. Let's wait and see. Qingming was stunned and was silent for a long time. No guardian has ever become a supreme. Who knows? You won't suffer a loss even if you try. The prophet smiled and waved his hand. In a book, a tree-shaped peerless Tao seed appeared in his hand. Song Tian chuckled. This junior brother is not greedy. The prophet said lazily, after all, he's also the human emperor. Go. In less than 300 years, the people of the demon plant lineage will come. Since they dare to come, stay here forever. Song Tian smiled and said, Of course. They are my first target on my path of conquest. In the Sea of Stars. Han Fei took a long breath and held Shimin Linglan's hand. I'm still a little uncomfortable under the watch of that prophet. This is not my human race after all. It's better to be careful now. Shimin Linglan said, those divine wood books record countless things, but there are no detailed records of the prophet. We don't even know how he was born. Han Fei smiled and said, it doesn't matter. It's a headache to think about it. Supreme venerables of the human race are too rare. The prophet deliberately hid it. I even guess that he is no weaker than the first supreme. That powerful? Shimin Linglan was a little surprised, because in those divine wood books, the first supreme had already become a peerless legend, almost invincible. If the prophet was the same, didn't it mean that two super powerhouses had suddenly appeared in the human race that can dominate all the races in the sea of stars? Han Fei said, "It's just a guess. Let's go. It's useless to think too much. Our time is limited. We can't waste the opportunities in the chaotic era. Now that half of the sea of stars here is covered by the chaotic mist, it should be our top priority to make up for the gap in fundamental talent." In the chaotic era, it was not difficult to find the chaotic mist. Most of the chaotic sea was enveloped by the mist. It could be said that one could find chaotic mist anywhere. However, when people of this era went to find the chaotic mist, it was mostly because there were peerless treasures, supreme nature treasures, various spiritual treasures, divine fruits, immortal soil, creation, and luck. However, what Han Fei and Shimin Linglan needed was only the chaotic origin energy, which they only needed to slowly absorb. Therefore, in a chaotic mist of the chaotic sea, two big cocoons wrapped in the chaotic origin power stood quietly. Within a radius of billions of kilometers, the law of time was flowing, enveloping this place. 500 times time acceleration was Shimin Linglan's limit. In time acceleration, after only 3,000 years, Han Fei's bottleneck loosened. 200 years later in reality, suddenly, one of them broke out of the cocoon first. In the next moment, Han Fei appeared from the cocoon, and the broken big cocoon turned into a torrent and poured into his body. With nearly 500 times the time acceleration, in fact, Han Fei had already replenished his fundamental talent after about 40 years in reality, which was about 20,000 years in the acceleration state. And this so-called completion of fundamental talent was actually increasing sensitivity to the laws, spiritual energy, and chaotic chi between the heavens and earth. His body was more adapted to these powers than before. In terms of basic combat power, it had only increased by 400,000 points. For Han Fei, this improvement was already very great. This meant that at his peak, he could reach 12 million combat power, even surpassing Song Tian. Of course, he didn't surpass Song Tian much, and Song Tian had already reached the second level of the path of invincibility, the invincible body. Therefore, he couldn't win a life-and-death battle against Song Tian, but he might not lose either. However, Han Fei wasn't very surprised about this now, because whether it was the peak level 8 million combat power or the peak level 12 million combat power, they were at most the early or mid-stage combat power of the sea. Quelling God. It didn't affect the overall situation of the sea realm. He could beat those who should be defeated, and he still couldn't beat those who shouldn't be defeated. It was even as difficult as ascending to the sky to kill a sea-quelling god. Of course, the real benefit of replenishing one's fundamental talent would only be revealed after he broke through the supreme divine technique. After learning the supreme technique, Han Fei knew that the real power that could enable him to change the layout of the sea realm would only be obtained by him after he broke through the supreme technique. Once he broke it through, if he guessed right, he would directly enter the Dominator realm. After all, the supreme technique was a cultivation method of the Dominator realm in itself. Another 300 years after Han Fei broke out of the cocoon, Shimin Linglan's big cocoon was also broken. After Shimin Linglan broke out of the cocoon, she saw Han Fei sitting cross-legged not far away from her, as if branding a seal on his own body. Seal? Is your power going to exceed your body's capacity? Shimin Linglan's face changed slightly. She had almost read all the books on the prophet's side, so she naturally knew how terrifying the supreme divine technique was. If Han Fei couldn't suppress it and didn't have a way of breakthrough, as time passed, his body would explode and he would die. Han Fei smiled and said, "It doesn't matter. The god of war has survived for a million years, so I'll naturally be fine. Besides, after replenishing my basic talent this time, my strength has soared, and my upper limit has greatly increased." What about you? Shimin Linglan nodded. Yes, as you know, my talent and foundation haven't been very good since I was young. Even when I entered the Time Temple, it was only because the Tao I comprehended was powerful, so it made me seem powerful. But in fact, my basic talent is much weaker. The chaotic origin energy is not only modifying my basic talent, but also modifying my bloodline. Therefore, my improvement is relatively slow. Without time acceleration, this time might be as long as nearly 300,000 years. It doesn't matter. You're now a heavenly talent of the Time Temple. Then how much has your combat power increased? Shimin Linglan pondered for a moment. More than 8 million, nearly 9 million. However, I can feel that after my talent was replenished, the bloodline modification stopped. Therefore, I'm afraid I won't have a chance to improve by trickery in the future. Han Fei couldn't help but smile. It's already powerful enough. Have you ever seen anyone who can have 18 million combat power as soon as he steps into the quelling divine level? However, born in the chaotic era, they do have some innate advantages. The human race's god-slaying level powerhouses are all extremely powerful. I think it's the result of completing their basic talent. This means that the strong masters of the chaotic era far exceed the strong masters of the later generations. Shimin Linglan nodded heavily. This improvement did indeed make her feel incredulous. Not only did it repair the gap in her talent, but it also made up for the lack of bloodline. In just 500 years, her strength had almost doubled. How unbelievable was that? However, thinking of the situation in the future, Shimin Linglan frowned slightly. Unfortunately, it's not enough. This is not enough to compete with the ominous. You still have me. Now, he at least had a direction for the breakthrough of the supreme divine technique. With a ready-made example in front of him, he would definitely benefit greatly. Shimin Linglan said, "Time is tight. We've already wasted a lot of time. I'd better accompany you to comprehend the path of invincibility first. This is much more difficult than absorbing the chaotic origin energy." Okay. Han Fei had clearly completed the first level of the path of invincibility. In the great monarch realm, even the first human emperor couldn't defeat him, let alone the strong masters of the same realm in the sea realm in the future. As for the second realm, he used his invincible will to borrow the power of the world to comprehend momentum, so as to reach a state where the enemy couldn't hit or injure him. While Shimin Linglan was absorbing the chaotic origin, Han Fei had used the great Tao of life replacement many times. However, in just 3 seconds, it was really difficult for him to comprehend the so-called momentum. However, according to the records of the Prophet, the way to comprehend momentum was to observe the world and comprehend the power of the world. It meant that if one wanted to comprehend the power of the world, he had to observe the world itself. Since Songtian could comprehend it, Han Fei believed that he could too. He said, "Linglan, there are all kinds of races in the chaos. Why don't we travel in this vast sea of stars? Okay, it would be even better if there was a ship. Shiman Linglan smiled. She liked the feeling of wandering. Ha ha ha. Then let's build a ship. Time passed quickly. 500 years passed slowly, and a big black ship sailed silently in the vast sea of stars. This era hadn't changed much because of the appearance of Han Fei and the others. However, it wasn't that Han Fei didn't know anything. About 300 years ago, something happened that shook the sea of stars. A war between the human race and the demon plant race shocked all the races in the Sea of Stars. 10 years later, the demon plant line announced to relocate to the chaotic, vast land. As everyone knew, that was the territory of the human race. This action of the demon plant line basically meant that they were willing to live under the human race. To put it bluntly, they had submitted to the human race. Han Fei didn't go to the battle. However, after that, Han Fei went to that battlefield, traced back time, and saw some pictures of the past battles. In that battle, the supreme-level cultivators didn't take action. Instead, Song Tian led the war and fought a battle in the divine body realm, the third realm of the path of invincibility. In that battle, as many as 4 sea-quelling god-level powerhouses of the demon plant lineage died, and more than 30 god-slaying level powerhouses of the demon plants died. As for the human race, none of the sea-quelling god-level powerhouses died. However, among the god-slaying level powerhouses that Han Fei saved in the past, a total of 7 died. Only the goddess who mastered the law of life didn't die, and the others all died. Seeing this scene, Han Fei could only sigh. He couldn't change this era. In the next few hundred years, there were endless battles in the Sea of Stars. But Han Fei didn't pay attention to it anymore, because he would find out what he should see and know when he saw Song Tian again in the future. In the vast world, Han Fei and Ling Lan became pure spectators here, the two of them traveling in the starry river together. There was a rumor in this world. It was said that in the vast chaotic sea of stars, there was a lone ship that always sailed in the mist, mysterious and extraordinary. On this day, the lone ship broke the silence of the starry sky and appeared in a place not too far away from the chaotic vast land. On the deck, Han Fei sighed slightly. We've been in this era for 1,000 years. Perhaps I was too hasty and tried to get to know the world in a mere 500 years. It's unrealistic. I have to change my way. Let's go. It's time to leave. Shiman Linglan gently hugged Han Fei from behind. I will definitely miss this period of time. Although it's short, it's extremely beautiful. There are no disputes, no wars, no schemes or plots. What a pity. Han Fei smiled. Therefore, we have to win. Only by defeating the ominous can there be infinite beauty. Swish, swish. The time river was broken, the ship and this person disappeared without a trace. The two of them came and left in a hurry. Only an old man in the human world stroked his pale beard and looked at the quiet deep sky with a smile. Back to the time river, the vast ocean navigator, the demon purification pot, the concealing divine seal, and the creation divine prison, Han Fei felt that everything had returned. But this was already expected. Han Fei wasn't surprised. At this moment, the two of them were going down the river, but not fast. From the beginning, Han Fei had already thought about giving himself 500 years to see the world and comprehend the Tao. If he didn't succeed in 500 years, he would give up immediately. This was because in the time river, he could still see the changes of this era clearly. Sure enough, if one were in the Time River and looked at the sea realm, he would find that the mist on the chaotic vast land was quickly dissipating, and everything on the chaotic vast land was changing. From the towering snowy peaks to the steep cliffs of the surging sea. From bloody wars to silent tombs. From the vast green forest to the earth cracks burned by the flames of war. From the celebratory sacrificial dances to the heavy mourning of the death. Knells. War, riots, landslides, seas overturned, the world changed, seas turning into fields, mountains buried in seas. As the long river of time flowed, Han Fei could see the prosperity of the human race. One day in the long river of time was 10,000 years in chaos. When Han Fei and Shimen Linglan crossed 27 million years in a day, the 6 lineages were unified. At this moment, the chaotic vast land was almost divided up by the 6 lineages. Except for the primordial stillborn, each lineage controlled millions of races. When the chaotic vast land couldn't bear the burden anymore, a large number of races moved away. The moment Han Fei saw the 6 lineages gathering in the human world, he knew that Sangtian was about to make a breakthrough. He didn't expect that Sangtian's breakthrough would take more than 27 million years. The 6 races pledged allegiance, and the 4 seas were unified. The heavens sought the Tao, and the path of the Supreme appeared. When Han Fei and Shimen Linglan cut through the long time slope again and appeared in this period of the chaotic era, Sangtian held the sky and swallowed the divine tribulation. Countless races bowed to him. The two of them immediately realized that since Sangtian had gained his Tao, all the creatures in this domain would submit to him. If they didn't leave, they would have to submit to him too. Han Fei immediately congratulated him from a distance and cupped his hands. Congratulations on your breakthrough, senior brother. At this moment, Sangtian turned his head and looked into the sea of stars. The prophet, the guardian, also looked at the sea of stars. Only they knew who had appeared. Swish, swish. In the next moment, Han Fei and Shimen Linglan left this era and returned to the Time River. At this moment, Han Fei was still scared. Was this the power gained after breaking through the supreme technique? It was completely different from the breakthroughs of Senior Brother Azure Dragon, 5th Senior Brother, and even Senior Brother Lei Heng. That was a power that ruled the universe. Fortunately, he left in time. Otherwise, that world would definitely try its best to kill him and Shimen Linglan. Shimen Linglan said, I believe you can make a breakthrough too. You will be stronger than him. Han Fei laughed. You really think highly of me. Shimen Linglan smiled sweetly. Anyway, my husband is no worse than anyone else. The two of them continued to descend along the Time River. Because they could only see a limited area, Han Fei and Shimen Linglan couldn't see clearly what happened in the Sea of Stars in the chaotic era. However, less than 10 million years after Sangtian became a supreme, countless strong masters rushed to the Sea of Stars one after another. At that moment, Han Fei knew that the ominous had come. Han Fei and Shimen Linglan tried to find the ominous through the vast ocean. Navigator. They did find it. At an unknown river embankment in the Sea of Stars, Han Fei saw the scene of the ominous fighting with Sangtian. The first glance at the ominous, Han Fei was in a daze, thinking that he had seen all living beings. It seemed that the ominous could be any creature or of any race. Yes, a person was like all living beings, but different from the all-living being look like eldest senior brother. The ominous all-living being look was Too ferocious. Even through the time river, this glance was discovered by the ominous. Immediately, an ominous mist tried to penetrate the time river. However, as soon as this mist touched the time river, it was destroyed by Songtian. Han Fei and Shimin Linglan didn't dare to look anymore and immediately fled. Han Fei asked, "That should be the ominous, right?" Han Fei asked with lingering fear, "Did you see him clearly?" Han Fei smiled. "Me too." Han Fei couldn't imagine how to fight such an enemy. He was already half a sea. Quelling god-level powerhouse, but in the face of such an opponent, he felt that he couldn't resist a single move of the other party. Therefore, only a Dominator-level powerhouse, the strongest Dominator-level powerhouse, could fight the ominous. Shimin Linglan said, "Let's go straight to the end of the first ominous battle." Han Fei nodded solemnly. Okay. As the vast ocean navigator turned, the two of them no longer deliberately slowed down, but swam down the time river at full speed. After a few seconds, as the vast ocean navigator pointed, Shimin Linglan waved her hand, and the blade of hope cut open the time river. The two of them entered the chaotic era again. But this time, entering this place didn't mean that they could watch the battles between the strong masters of this era and the ominous. Therefore, Han Fei and Shimin Linglan still appeared near the chaotic vast land, which was close to the sea realm. When the two of them appeared, after only a few seconds, a teleportation channel appeared in front of them. An old and familiar voice sounded, "I haven't seen you for 90 million years. How have you been?" The prophet. Han Fei and Shimin Linglan looked at each other and appeared in the residence of the prophet that they seemed to have just left. As for the prophet, he still looked sage-like and unfathomable. Han Fei said, "Greetings, senior prophet." The prophet smiled. "It shouldn't have been long for you, right?" Han Fei nodded slightly. "Senior prophet, can you predict our arrival?" The prophet shook her head slightly. "No, I've been waiting for you to appear. Because your appearance this time should mean that the ominous has subsided. But unfortunately." Unfortunately? He was really afraid to hear the other half of the prophet's words, especially in such a tone. The prophet heaved a long sigh. "Unfortunately, you didn't appear at a good time." Han Fei frowned. "Senior prophet, is there anything wrong with this time?" The prophet looked at Han Fei. "You've mastered the vast ocean navigator, right? That's why you can appear at this time accurately." Han Fei nodded. There was nothing to hide, and he couldn't. Han Fei's eyelids twitched. The prophet's words shocked him. This was because, from the meaning of his words, it seemed that the ominous wasn't defeated by Songtian. If even Songtian, who had walked the path of the Supreme, couldn't defeat the ominous, what would the only solution the prophet mentioned be? Han Fei asked solemnly, "What solution?" The prophet suddenly smiled and said, "Perhaps you can use this method too. Therefore, I'll take you to witness a way to temporarily calm the ominous." Han Fei's heart trembled. Wasn't he here to find a way to solve the ominous? He didn't expect to see it in such a way. In the next moment, the prophet waved her hand gently, and the endless mist disappeared in an instant. In an instant, the prophet took Han Fei and Shimin Linglan to a dilapidated sea of stars territory that was full of ominous aura. At this moment, in this domain, 43 supreme-level powerhouses, led by Songtian, were trying their best to suppress and purify the ominous creatures that spanned the galaxies. Swish. The appearance of the prophet with Han Fei and Shimin Linglan immediately attracted the attention of all the supreme-level powerhouses. Song Tian immediately shouted in a low voice, "Old man, why, are you here?" Song Tian's expression was extremely ugly, because he saw Han Fei and Shimin Linglan. The prophet sighed. Alas! It's finally time. Song Tian's eyes almost popped out as he said anxiously, "Old man, don't mess around." The prophet heaved a long sigh. "It's not that I'm messing around, but everyone here today may have to mess around with me. Song Tian, you are no exception." With that, the prophet looked at Han Fei with a smile and said, "This is the worst solution, as well as the last resort. But if there's really no way, you can give it a try." Buzz. The prophet immediately turned into an extremely majestic body, expanding crazily. Huff. As the prophet opened her mouth and took a deep breath, the ominousness of the galaxy quickly decreased at a visible speed. In the ominous mist, countless races, faces, and voices were roaring and shouting. "You're asking to be killed. I have an indestructible body. Even if you destroy my body, I will return one day. You can't trap me." The prophet's voice rumbled, "I'll leave you to my descendants, to kill you in the future. Among the myriad races, there are always people who are not afraid of sacrifice. Even if I destroy your body, I might not be sacrificed. Wait, it's not swallowing, but sealing." However, how long could this seal the ominous Shimin Linglan look? The more than 40 supreme-level powerhouses also sighed. Someone smiled and said, "We've come to this point after all." Someone shook his head. "Forget it. After all, we're already tired of looking at the chaotic star sea." Someone was even relieved. "I'm tired after fighting for so long. Haven't you always wanted to take a look on that road? Even if we can't return, so what? Ha ha ha. It's been a long time since it's so lively. With so many people together, the road must be very lively." Buzz. These supremes, like the prophet, all used themselves as containers and began to devour the ominous. In the ominous mist, countless faces were shouting, "You lunatics, ha ha ha. Without you, this sea of stars will be mine sooner or later." "Shut up." Song Tian roared angrily, his body shining with golden light. He reached out and patted his forehead, and a soul body left his body and flew towards Han Fei. He said, "Junior brother, it's up to you in the future." With that, his body dispersed into boundless golden light, covering half of the Star River. The endless golden light actually swallowed nearly half of the ominous body in one breath. "Human Emperor, how can you do this alone? Human Emperor, you're going too far by eating it alone. Human Emperor, do you think only you have a big appetite? Hey, don't eat so much in one bite." In the blink of an eye, the 43 supreme-level cultivators and the prophet had divided up the ominous body, which dumbfounded Han Fei and Shimin Linglan. Swish! 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 One supreme after another disappeared. The prophet raised his hand and waved it, taking Han Fei and Shimin Linglan to pass through the endless mist together. Again. When Han Fei's eyes lit up again, he saw a boundless dam. The surging tide emitted deafening sounds. In front of him was a boundless sea, enveloped by a faint mist and filled with divine light in the distance. Just looking at it, he seemed to feel an inexplicable summoning. Han Fei was horrified. When he realized where he was, he immediately knew what the prophet's so-called last resort was. This method was not to use the bodies of these supreme beings as containers to seal the ominous, but to temporarily seal the ominous and bring it into this Path of no return. Once they entered this path of no return, they could even release the ominous. At any time. How could the ominous return when even the first supreme couldn't? Return? The prophet looked at Han Fei. That's right. It's this path. Your appearance helped me prove the feasibility of this method. If the ominous can return, you won't appear. Since you can appear, it means that he can't return either. Although this chaotic star sea is big, it's no longer interesting for a supreme. It might not be a bad thing to embark on this path. Han Fei was shocked. He subconsciously asked, Senior, what about the sea of stars if you enter this path? The prophet smiled. There has never been a shortage of strong masters in this world. Not today, not in the future. With that, the prophet shouted at this place, Void, my disciple. In the future, you have to guard this place. Yes, teacher. Before Han Fei could react, he felt that a vast void suddenly floated over, as if it had been waiting here. In the next moment, the huge void turned into a human. Han Fei couldn't believe his ears and eyes, because in his eyes, the figure that appeared was as deep as the sea of stars, and his appearance couldn't be seen clearly. F*CK, eldest senior brother? Han Fei subconsciously said this, and the figure, the prophet, and the heavens were all stunned. In the next moment, Song Tian laughed. Ha ha ha. I didn't expect you to really be my junior brother. It's a pity that I can't fight you again. I hope I can fight you again one day. Han Fei had already reacted and shouted, Senior brother, I'll wait for you to return and fight. The prophet looked at Han Fei, and Han Fei also looked at the prophet. Although he was shocked, if the prophet was the teacher of the Void Temple, he would gladly accept it. Han Fei bowed respectfully. Teacher. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. After laughing 3 times, the prophet pressed a finger between Han Fei's eyebrows. Since you're my disciple, I should give you a gift. Let me take you to foresee the myriad worlds. In Han Fei's mind, billions of stars suddenly appeared. There were origin grounds, unknown domains, chaotic mist, and primordial chaos secrets. At that moment, he seemed to transform into billions of pairs of eyes, looking down at the myriad worlds. Images flashed rapidly in his mind. He could even feel the changes in the world from birth to decay. When the myriad worlds were combined, they formed a magnificent world. Han Fei didn't know it himself, but Shiman Linglan saw it clearly. A third eye opened between Han Fei's eyebrows, and his body was shining with golden light, making him look like a fairy. After a long time, suddenly, the countless images in Han Fei's mind froze and dissipated. Only one picture appeared. It was a divine vine, rippling in a flowing spring, and the spring was all made of laws. Buzz. Han Fei suddenly opened his eyes, looking excited. However, there was no longer the prophet, Song Tian, and the others in front of him. Only eldest senior brother was sitting on the shore of the dam, looking at him quietly. The moment Han Fei opened his eyes, he knew that he had embarked on the second level of the path of invincibility. Although Han Fei was confident that he could reach the second level with his own strength, it would take time, and what he lacked was time. Therefore, the last finger of the prophet could be considered a heavy gift. However, this was not the true gift of the prophet. What he really sent out was the last picture. Han Fei was very familiar with that small vine. It was the demon purification pot's divine vine. Han Fei was excited. When he saw this spine, he remembered the words of the ancient human powerhouse back then. He said that the demon purification pot had the 10th vine, but he wasn't sure. Because this was in the chaotic era. The demon purification pot didn't belong to just one person in the future, and the vines had once collapsed. Therefore, Hanfei wasn't sure. However, he had a way to be sure. This was because in the last trace of soul that Songtian returned to him, there were what he had seen and heard for 90 million years, even many insights, as well as some major events that happened in the chaotic era. And in these big events, in addition to Songtian's own mastery of the supreme technique, there was also a person involved, a person beyond Hanfei's expectations. This person was called Li Daoi. Li Daoi was the child of a human powerhouse and a female demon plant cultivator. As soon as he was born, he triggered a brilliant astronomical phenomenon and had 3 peerless Dao seeds in the forms of a divine tree, a Kylan, and a phoenix on him. However, Li Daoi didn't belong to the human race or the demon plant race. He was born with a brand new spiritual heritage. Being a lineage alone, he could be said to be the favored child of the heavens. The guardian of the human race, Qing Ming, once said that apart from the luck of 6 lineages, of all the luck in the chaotic era, Li Daoi occupied 8%. Li Daoi's path of growth was also magical. When he was young, he experienced tens of thousands of tribulations, but he could always avert danger. This confirmed the saying of Qing Ming about his luck. When Li Daoi was young, he had already become very famous in the chaotic vast land. Of course, this couldn't do without the support of the human race and the demon plant lineage. After all, in terms of a sense of belonging, Li Daoi could say that he was a human or a demon plant. He often entered and left the human race and the demon plant lineage and often called himself that. And the ominous appeared because of Li Daoi. As far as the heavens knew, the ominous suddenly appeared because Li Daoi pulled out the demon purification pot in the depths of the chaos. Yes, because of his brilliant luck, Li Daoi became the first user of the demon purification pot. Therefore, as long as he confirmed how many vines Li Daoi's demon purification pot had, he would know if the divine vine he saw was the 10th. He's really a genius. Hanfei couldn't help but sigh. Even 80,000 years ago, Songtian left the vast ocean navigator to Qing Ming, the 6 primordial purple gates to Li Daoi, and the big bell he had once used to another super god-level powerhouse of the human race who had a chance to be a supreme. From this, it could be seen how much Songtian valued Li Daoi. Although he was not actually a human, Songtian clearly regarded him as the main force of the future against the ominous. In the end, Songtian forcibly fused the 3 supreme nature treasures and forged a divine seal with all their strength. He refined the will and luck of the human emperor into it and named it the primordial seal. This seal was temporarily controlled by Qing Ming. Only those with the bloodline of the human race could control it. Songtian wanted to use it as an inheritance, hoping that the human race could last forever. However, treasures were treasures after all. Even with the primordial seal, the human race inevitably declined in the end. However, this was already the last thing Songtian could do for the human race. Obviously, after fighting the ominous for many years, Songtian also knew that the ominous was difficult to deal with, so he made plans in advance for some of his treasures. Thousands of pieces of information poured into Hanfei's mind, and these were only a small part of the infinite information. In this information, there was also the origin of the primordial purple gates, which were actually given to Tsongtian by the prophet. As for Tsongtian's insights about the supreme technique, Han Fei needed to spend some time studying them carefully. At this moment, after Han Fei woke up from the power of the prophet's finger, he instinctively began to search. Except for Shiman Linglan guarding this place, there was only eldest senior brother. The moment Han Fei opened his eyes, Shiman Linglan didn't notice it, because she was sitting beside Han Fei, cultivating. The law of time surged around her, and she had clearly used time acceleration. Seeing this, Han Fei's first reaction was that a long time had passed. Otherwise, Shiman Linglan wouldn't have needed to make use of even a moment. With her personality, she would probably have been guarding him all the time. Han Fei immediately bowed. Greetings, eldest senior brother. As soon as Han Fei spoke, he woke Shiman Linglan up. The latter, hurriedly, opened her eyes, cancelled the time acceleration, and quickly got up. You're awake? Han Fei nodded slightly. Have I comprehended it for a long time? Less than 800 years. 800 years? Han Fei was shocked. He felt that he had only comprehended it for half an hour. 800 years? At that moment, eldest senior brother slowly said, there are some paths that have no shortcuts for ordinary people. To comprehend the path of invincibility, you need to see the infinite of the world. 800 years is already extremely fast. If teacher hadn't taken you to see the myriad worlds, even if your talent is unparalleled, you might not have been able to succeed in 8 million years. Han Fei couldn't help but click his tongue. Eldest senior brother is right. Eldest senior brother shook his head slightly. Strictly speaking, I am not your senior brother at the moment. I just know that you will be my junior brother. The corners of Han Fei's mouth twitched slightly, and he thought to himself. Eldest senior brother was too serious. However, perhaps because eldest senior brother was too serious, he could guard this place alone for countless years. Han Fei couldn't imagine how lonely eldest senior brother could be if he had been guarding here since this moment. In the next moment, eldest senior brother raised his hand, and a divine wood scroll flew towards Han Fei. Eldest senior brother said, before my teacher left, he asked me to hand this over to you. It's some of my teacher's research results. Take a look at them. And then destroy them. The fewer people know about some things, the better. At this moment, eldest senior brother was still a little cold to Han Fei. Or rather, eldest senior brother had always been like this. This was just his normal tone. Han Fei took the Divine Wood book and opened it. He was shocked, because what was recorded in this book was the path of reincarnation. It read, I created the path of reincarnation for 3 purposes. Firstly, the soul was born in the world. If it wasn't destroyed, it could reincarnate. This path could protect all races from being destroyed. If necessary, it could seal the door of rebirth and kill all living beings in order to protect the divine fire seed of all races. They may appear again. Secondly, contain the ominous, cleanse the sins of the world, weaken the source of the ominous power, and delay the recovery time of the ominous. Seeing this, Han Fei knew why Jiang Taichu could make a deal with the ominous. With the path of reincarnation. Obviously, the appearance of the path of reincarnation had greatly restrained the ominous. The main source of the ominous power was the negative side of the myriad races in the sea of stars. But if the myriad races in the infinite ocean had all embarked on the path of reincarnation after they died and all their sins had been brought into this path and purified, how much of the sins could be left to the ominous? With this alone, the path of reincarnation had surpassed countless supreme nature treasures. The third was a portrait. When Han Fei was immersed in his thoughts, the portrait seemed to come to life, and Han Fei's consciousness seemed to be taken into another time and space. He saw a place where primordial purple chi and chaotic mist intertwined. And the demon purification pot was born here. And a white-haired old man, who was the prophet, was holding a long sword and standing in front of the demon purification pot. The prophet didn't look back, but said leisurely, "This thing was born by nature. It has 10 vines and feeds on the chaotic origin. It can understand all races, observe their luck, and control their creation. Unfortunately, the 10th vine hasn't matured yet." The prophet looked up as if predicting something. After a while, he slowly said, "It's too late." With that, the prophet waved his sword and cut off the 10th vine, sweeping it into his sleeve. Then, the prophet drew in the air with her finger and left a message. "This calabash has 10 vines and its 10th vine is difficult to nurture. I've cut it off and will nurture it in the chaotic origin. When it matures, it can be taken and can resolve the danger of the world." At this moment, the prophet turned around and looked at Han Fei as if they were looking at each other from a distance. The prophet said, "Remember, this thing is ultimately an external object." Swish. The scene in front of him dissipated, and Han Fei suddenly came back to himself. He was shocked. What did his teacher mean by the last sentence? Did he say that the demon purification pot was an external object? Obviously, the prophet said the words to him, but why did Han Fei feel that he didn't understand it? He said the demon purification pot could resolve the ominous danger but emphasized that it was an external object after all. What was his teacher trying to say? At this moment, the divine wood book in Han Fei's hand shattered into powder and dissipated in the vast sea of stars. Han Fei took a deep breath. The demon purification pot appeared in these 90 million years. There was no telling if it was because he had mentioned this name to the prophet or because he had foreseen it, but he had made a plan in advance. Han Fei never expected that the 10th vine was cut off and hidden by the prophet. As for where the chaotic origin was, Han Fei seemed to have a clue. Luo Xiaobai once reminded him that under the path of reincarnation, the river of laws flowed from and to unknown places. Now, since Han Fei knew that the path of reincarnation was created by the prophet, the 10th vine should be in this river if he guessed right. At this moment, Han Fei figured out a lot of things. Shiman Linglan, what's wrong? Han Fei shook his head slightly and then looked at eldest senior brother. Eldest senior brother, have you read this book? Eldest senior brother shook his head slightly and said after a pause, "You don't have to think about what teacher left behind. You'll understand it when the time is right." Han Fei couldn't help but smile bitterly. Eldest senior brother, can you tell me what kind of person teacher is? There seems to be no record of him in the entire human race. Eldest senior brother looked into the depths of the path of return. After a long time, he said calmly, "He's just an ordinary old man who has lived for a long time." Han Fei thought to himself, eldest senior brother is indeed not a suitable person to chat with. He certainly didn't believe that his teacher was an ordinary old man. Perhaps eldest senior brother just didn't want to say it. As for when eldest senior brother became teacher's disciple, he probably wouldn't know until he dated back to an even older era. Of course, Han Fei wouldn't trace back to the source for this little curiosity. Otherwise, he would have too many things to trace back to. Now, his teacher had already given him a hint that the vine he saw was the 10th vine. So there was no need for him to find Li Daoi. Han Fei said, "Eldest senior brother, I should go now. Please give me a ride. I'm going to the chaotic vast land." Okay. After a while, when Han Fei and Shiman Linglan walked out of a void, they had already appeared outside the chaotic vast land. On a lone peak where the human race was, Qingming was sitting on the tiger's back, quietly looking at the sea of stars. When Han Fei and Shiman Linglan appeared behind her, Qingming didn't look back, but said indifferently, "Haven't you left yet?" Han Fei cupped his hands. "Senior Qingming, I want to ask you for a favor." "Yes?" Although Qingming didn't like Han Fei, what the prophet said was right. After accommodating a trace of Han Fei's soul, Song Tian's luck didn't decrease, but increased. Besides, Han Fei was the future human emperor after all. He appeared here for the chaotic star sea, so she wouldn't refuse Han Fei's request. Han Fei said, "I want the bones of strong masters. I don't need complete ones. I just need part of them. No matter what race they are from, the more the better." Han Fei couldn't take the complete corpse, because he didn't know if the corpses would affect future generations or how much they would. But if it was just a part of the bones, he believed that Qingming could help him. "Okay, come to get them in 3 months. 3 months later. When Han Fei held a small world of Dao bones in his hand, his eyes lit up. He knew that this trip to the chaotic era was about to end. After the battle of Songtian and his teacher was over, what was left was the battle of the Doomsday Era, a battle that belonged to him. In the Time River, Han Fei hesitated for a moment and found the end of the sea of stars with the help of the vast ocean navigator. Across the Time Sea, Han Fei bowed deeply to the lonely figure in front of the dam before leaving. Shiman Linglan said, "Suppressing this place alone for billions of years. The Master of the Void must be very lonely, right?" Alas, this might be the path eldest senior brother chose. Han Fei had a feeling that the eldest senior brother at this moment should be a little different from the eldest senior brother in the future. At this moment, he seemed to be more cold and unapproachable. The one in the latter generation was much better and made people feel very amiable. Perhaps some stories have more or less happened to eldest senior brother during this long period of time. Doomsday Era. Sea Realm, Central Sea Divine Realm, Free City. The current Central Sea Divine Realm was abnormally prosperous. After breaking the situation of the former rule of the strong, countless strong masters from the various races in the Sea Realm rushed to the Central Sea Divine Realm. Large and small forces established sects in the Central Sea Divine Realm and set up camps in the Free City. For a moment, the Free City became the most prosperous place in the Sea Realm, gathering countless heavenly talents and resources from the Sea Realm. Its open cultivation method caused the 4 divine realms to imitate it. Here, there were endless opportunities. As long as one worked hard, he could always exchange for the cultivation techniques, weapons, combat skills, and other things he liked. And the human race was growing at an unbelievable speed in this magnificent world. Many young heavenly talents had appeared in the human race. Their cultivation speed could be said to be terrifying. There were even as many as 5 or 6 people who had been confirmed to be incarnation bodies of gods. These people had stepped into the monarch realm in just 1,000 years. More importantly, the Free City, which was the pioneer of cultivation in the sea realm, actually traded a large amount of the power of laws in the city. This matter was determined by the free city, the 5 divine realms, and countless strong masters in the sea realm after negotiation. The purpose of trading the power of laws was very obvious. It was to help immortal-level powerhouses quickly stack laws. This was 100, 1,000, or even 10,000 times faster than their slowly drawing the laws in the chaotic void. Of course, if they wanted to stack tens of thousands of laws, the price they had to pay was not small. Therefore, although this method was good, the time was too short. In less than 2,000 years, only no more than 100 great monarchs were created. The rise of the sea realm was like the last moments of life before death. But everyone knew that this was the last struggle of all races. Some chose to lie flat, some chose to fight one last time, some chose to be extremely crazy, and some chose to enjoy the mortal world. However, these were mostly the choices of ordinary people. After all, this world was always supported by strong masters. Many sky-opening realm powerhouses in the sea realm chose to go to the Sea of Stars. If they were destined to die in 10,000 years, they also wanted to see the wonders of the Sea of Stars and the brilliance of the chaotic sea, not to survive in the sea realm for 10,000 years. Swish, swish. A time river appeared in the void, and Han Fei and Shiman Linglan walked out. Han Fei couldn't help but sigh. I thought I would return in a few years at most, but it took me 1,800 years. Let's go home. Wait a minute. Shiman Linglan was a little nervous at this moment. Do you really want me to go with you? A trace of gentleness appeared on Han Fei's face. Now, you are also my wife. Shiman Linglan took a deep breath and seemed to have made a decision. She shouted in a low voice, go. Huh. Han Fei scanned around with his perception. He wanted to find Xia Shaochan and go straight there, but Xia Shaochan, Han Chani, Zhang Xuanyu, Lu Renquang, Luo Xiaobai, and the others were all gone. Han Fei activated his original Great Tao, reached the strength of a sea quelling god, and scanned the entire sea realm with his perception. His heart sank slightly. Senior brother Six God, senior brother Lei Heng, Yu Linka, and Old Fierce were not around either. All the gods of the divine descendants were gone, and there were only 7 great monarchs left. Even in the sea of strange beasts, there were only less than 10 great monarchs left. The Emperor Sparrow seemed to sense Han Fei and was about to soar into the sky. Han Fei said, I'll find you later. Han Fei guessed that so many strong masters were missing in the sea realm. They must have gone to the Sea of Stars. At this moment, Qiu Wanren was the only one guarding the central sea divine realm. After Han Fei glanced at Qiu Wanren immediately looked back. 1,800 years, you're finally back? Swish, swish. When Han Fei appeared in front of Qiu Wanren, he couldn't help but ask in surprise, you made a breakthrough? Qiu Wanren snorted proudly. In the creation divine prison, I've thought of countless ways to become a sea-quelling god. Coupled with the spirit of plants and trees and the treasures of the divine descendants, it's not difficult for me to become a sea-quelling god. Han Fei said, congratulations. Where are they? After a trip to the chaotic era, meeting the ominous once, understanding the story of the First Supreme, observing the myriad worlds, and comprehending the invincible body, Han Fei had completely lost his respect for the sea-quelling god. In front of the ominous, the sea-quelling god could only play a limited role. Chiu Wanren didn't care about Han Fei's sincere congratulations. Instead, he said, they were all summoned away. While you were away, something big happened in the Sea of Stars. Han Fei couldn't help but look solemn. What happened? Chiu Wanren also said solemnly, I don't know what happened exactly, but an emergency summoning from the chaotic sea took away almost 90% of the monarchs in the sea realm. Han Fei frowned. No one objects? Chiu Wanren said, your void temple allowed it. Besides, the one who came to summon them talked to every great monarch. It was said that on the first battlefield outside the chaotic sea, the battle was abnormally fierce, and countless strong masters of the myriad races died. I was at a critical period of breakthrough, so I couldn't leave even if I wanted to, so I stayed in the sea realm to guard it. Han Fei frowned. Is it so serious? Chiu Wanren, there's something more serious than this. Huh? Chiu Wanren's face sank. Now, we can't contact the chaotic sea. Buzz. Han Fei's heart trembled. What do you mean by can't contact the chaotic sea? Chiu Wanren looked at Han Fei and sighed slightly. An ominous mist cut off the chaotic sea, completely isolating the sea realm from the first battlefield. Outside the chaotic sea, Shiman Linglan was also stunned. How is that possible? The chaotic sea is so vast. How big a ominous mist will it have to be to isolate the chaotic sea? Chiu Wanren had never seen Shiman Linglan before, but he had more or less heard of her. Seeing that her strength was slightly above his, he sighed slightly. It did happen. The people from the three temples should know more about this. You should be able to contact them, right? Han Fei frowned. So, Xia Xiaochan, Yi, Zhang Xuanyu, and the others are all trapped in the so-called first battlefield. Chiu Wanren nodded. He was not from the three temples, couldn't contact them, and couldn't leave the sea realm, so the information he could know was limited. Shiman Linglan said, don't panic. I'll ask the Time Temple. Han Fei said, no, I'll contact the senior brothers or sisters of the Void Temple. Han Fei immediately triggered the Void Mark. Little junior brother, you're back? Senior sister Shenlu? Han Fei couldn't help being overjoyed. Senior sister Shenlu responded to him, which meant that it was still inconvenient for eldest senior brother, which meant that the ominous was still restrained by eldest senior brother. Han Fei hurriedly said, Senior sister Shenlu, I just returned from the chaotic era. What happened? Why was even the chaotic sea isolated? What's the situation on the first battlefield now? Senior sister Shenlu said, something unexpected did happen this time. On the ominous side, a second ominous above the dominator level seems to have appeared. What? For a moment, Han Fei felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His first thought was, how can I fight this? One ominous above the dominator level had already tortured the myriad races in the Sea of Stars for billions of years and almost destroyed them several times. Now there was another one. What was the point of fighting? Senior sister Shenlu said, little junior brother, don't be hasty. It's just suspected and hasn't been confirmed yet. At present, eldest senior brother and old three are restraining the ominous original body. On the first battlefield, Master of Time and I are personally guarding it and fighting the ominous that is suspected to be beyond the dominator level. We've fought a few times, but it's difficult to judge the other party's strength. However, this time, the ominous seems to be well prepared. It seems to have planned for a long time. They removed the ominous battlefield of nearly 1,000 domains. In the Sea of Stars at the same time, and all gathered in the chaotic sea. Isolating the chaotic sea. Obviously, they are preparing to eat the first battlefield in one go. Han Fei frowned. Then can the first battlefield withstand it? Senior Sister Shunlu said, we can resist it for the time being, but the number of people here is limited. We're surrounded by enemies both from the front and the back, so the strong masters of the myriad races can only defend. So far, we should be able to defend for 1,000 years. But I won't let him really nibble away the first battlefield. When necessary, I will kill my way into the ominous. But little junior brother, have you found a way to solve the ominous this time? Han Fei's face sank slightly. In fact, he really wanted to say that eldest senior brother knew the way to solve the ominous. However, no one knew if this method could still be used now. This was because in the primordial era, Jiang Bai exchanged the path of reincarnation for a truce. Besides, the ominous was indestructible. Teacher's solution could only resolve the urgent situation. Besides, the myriad races in the Sea of Stars didn't have as many supreme level powerhouses as in the chaotic era. Even if they could take the ominous into the path of no return, they might have to sacrifice all their dominator level powerhouses. However, now there seemed to be a second ominous that exceeded the dominator level. If he really used all his dominators to take away one of the ominous, and there was really another ominous that exceeded the dominator level, the Sea of Stars would be doomed. Han Fei pondered for a moment. Senior sister, I already have a direction to deal with the ominous. Wait for me. Senior Sister Shunli's tone was obviously higher. Really? Han Fei frowned. Yes. Senior Sister Shunlu immediately said, little junior brother, I'll wait for you for 800 years. You have to note that although the ominous seems to have staked everything and even isolated the chaotic sea, it doesn't mean that he has really given up on the Sea of Stars. With the ominous intelligence, it's very likely that he will secretly attack the sea realm. Han Fei asked, where is the death god? Senior Sister Shunlu didn't mention the death god just now, which meant that the death god wasn't in these two battles. He had either died or was in the Sea of Stars. But would the death god die? Obviously not, so Han Fei guessed that he should be the real guardian of the sea realm now. Senior Sister Shunlu said, you should be able to guess it, right? The death god is guarding the sea realm and monitoring the 1,000-domain battlefield, where the ominous had retreated from. At the same time, he has to be wary of the eternal race. If it's not necessary, don't disturb him. If you can guess it, the ominous naturally knows it, and the eternal race clearly knows it too. Therefore, the death god can't appear easily now. Got it. Senior sister, wait for me. After chatting with Senior Sister Shunlu, Han Fei looked solemn. What Senior Sister Shunlu said about killing her way into the ominous must be an extremely dangerous thing. How could she alone break through the attack that sealed the entire first battlefield? Besides, Senior Sister Shunlu wasn't the only one on the first battlefield. Fifth Senior Brother, Yulinka, Senior Sister Dark Shadow, Senior Brother Six God, and Lei Heng were all at the sea-quelling god level. In the past, a sea-quelling god was enough to suppress many battlefields. Even the first battlefield seemed to only need one sea-quelling god to guard it. But now, it could be said that all the sea-quelling god-level powerhouses in The entire sea realm had gone there, but they could only hold on for thousands of years. It could only be said that the situation had reached an unimaginable level. Seeing Han Fei's ugly expression, Shimin Linglan and Qiu Wanren couldn't help but ask, "How is it?" Han Fei said in a low voice, 800 years. The first battlefield can only be guarded for 800 years. 800 years? Qiu Wanren said in shock, "Didn't you say that there were still 10,000 years? It's only been less than 2,000 years, but it's already like this. Doesn't that mean that the sea realm will be gone in at most 3,000 years? Shimin Linglan said, "The masters of the three temples can all resist the ominous. They can only resist it for 3,000 years, right?" Han Fei said, "Master of Time is on the first battlefield. There seems to be a second ominous that surpasses the Dominator realm." Hiss. Qiu Wanren and Shimin Linglan were both stunned and didn't know what to say. Two existences above the Dominator level made them a little helpless and at a loss. Han Fei said, "Well, there might still be a way." Qiu Wanren asked, "What can you do to two ominous creatures above the Dominator level?" Han Fei said, "I suspect so. I can't be sure." Qiu Wanren couldn't help but blow his beard. An enemy who can trap even the Master of Time Temple is at least on the same level as the Masters of the Three Temple, even if he hasn't surpassed the Dominator level. If he wants to change the situation of the battle, he has to be at least at the Dominator level, right? How can there be a Dominator now? Han Fei felt bitter too. What was needed wasn't just a Dominator. The death god couldn't move easily now, or the Seal realm would be taken by the ominous. Even if the front line held on, if their home was gone, it would be useless. Senior Sister Shenlu didn't mention the dragon race, but even if Senior Brother Azure Dragon woke up, could he break through to the Dominator realm so quickly? If not, with the current dragon god, he probably wouldn't be able to change the current situation. Besides, the enemy was not just ominous. Once the Sea of Stars was defeated, the myriad races would be in danger. The Eternal Race would probably deal with the myriad races with the ominous. After all, for the Eternal Race, they were not afraid of the ominous. At present, there was no precedent of the ominous invading the Soul Sea. Besides, if the myriad races were destroyed, the luck of all the races in the world might flow into the Eternal Race. After all, there might only be their race left in the world. With the Eternal Race's usual style, they probably couldn't wait for the myriad races to be destroyed, right? Han Fei pondered for a moment. He had several ideas now. One was naturally to break through the Supreme Technique. Once the Supreme Technique was broken, he would definitely enter the Dominator realm. Even if he couldn't definitely change the situation with his own strength, at least it was possible. He had seen the scene of Santian swallowing half of the ominous body in one bite. If Santian could, so could he. Secondly, to collect all the 10 vines of the demon purification pot. It had been billions of years, and the 10th vine should be ripe, right? Since the demon purification pot was regarded as a treasure to suppress the ominous, its effect on the ominous couldn't be worse than that of a Dominator. Thirdly, kill a Dominator-level powerhouse and release the one on the 4th level of the Creation Divine Prison. This might be able to resolve the urgent situation. And the best way was naturally for him to break through the Supreme Technique. In this way, even if he couldn't kill the Dominator of the Eternal Race, he was confident that he could take back the demon purification pot's vine. After thinking for a moment, Han Fei made a decision. He had to try all the 3 methods. The eternal race was a big hidden danger that could explode at any time. Besides, whether it was for the demon purification pot's vine or to release the one in the creation divine prison, he had to fight the eternal race and had to win. However, how to fight them was a problem. They had a dominator, and there might not only be one dominator. Therefore, if he really wanted to fight them, he couldn't do it alone. However, old Han and his mother might be the people who knew the eternal race best in the entire sea of stars. He had to discuss this with them later. Xiao Wanren and Shiman Linglan didn't speak. They were waiting. At this moment, their strength wasn't enough to change the situation. But Han Fei could. The human race had risen, and Han Fei's luck was in the prime now. If there was anyone who could change the current situation when all the strong masters were stuck in fierce battles, this person must be Han Fei, which was the hope of countless people. Suddenly, Han Fei asked, "Senior, how is the divine vine now?" Qiu Wanren was stunned for a moment and then said, "No change." Han Fei said, "I'm going to take a look." Han Fei knew that if he wanted to break through the supreme technique, the primordial purple gates would be a great help. While parasitizing Tsangtian, he knew that the prophet had given the primordial purple gates to Tsangtian, and in addition to a massive amount of primordial purple qi in the primordial purple gates that could be used for cultivation. Their main function was to gather the luck of the 6 lineages, provide luck enhancement for Tsangtian to make a breakthrough, and strengthen his luck as the master of the world. The primordial purple gates could gather the luck of 6 lineages because of the path of reincarnation. When the remnant soul of the deceased entered the path of reincarnation, the green jade stone bridge absorbed the laws of the deceased. As for the primordial purple gates, they absorbed the luck of the deceased. Therefore, even if the path of reincarnation was sealed, the primordial purple gate could slowly gather the luck of 6 lineages. Therefore, the 6 primordial purple gates clearly corresponded to the 6 lineages. Han Fei could roughly guess why the chaotic divine race appeared. It was to nurture the divine vines. Tsangtian was equivalent to the divine vine at this moment, nourished by the luck of the 6 lineages, completely establishing his status as the master of the 6 lineages. Of course, being nurtured by luck didn't just mean a change in status. The ancient 6 lineages were born from the divine vine. The life forms in the divine fruits could be said to be heaven-defying. They were born as top templates. Otherwise, these people from the chaotic divine race wouldn't have deprived countless races of their luck just to accelerate the ripening of the divine vine. Han Fei knew the scene when Tsangtian made a breakthrough. At the moment when Tsangtian made a breakthrough, all the power helped him cultivate the supreme bone. Coupled with his belief that he could suppress all races, he crossed the 3 realms of gods, the god-slaying level, and the sea-quelling god in one step. However, Han Fei was not Tsangtian. Now, all the luck of the 6 lineages had been absorbed by the divine vine, leaving only the primordial purple qi. Han Fei couldn't use it even if he wanted to unless he could swallow the divine vine. Therefore, Han Fei could only find another way. In terms of luck, he might not be comparable to Tsangtian. In terms of power of faith absorption, he was definitely inferior to Tsangtian when he broke through the supreme technique. However, there was also something that Tsangtian couldn't compare to him, which was the dual spiritual heritage. The origin spiritual heritage helped him master the law of life, making him almost invincible in battle. The eternal darkness spiritual heritage helped him comprehend the essence of death and could allow him to live forever. In other aspects, he was basically on par with Songtian. Therefore, since Songtian could break through the supreme technique, he should be able to do the same. However, he still had to figure out how to break it. If he could absorb luck from the divine vine, his chances of a breakthrough could be greatly improved. Another moment later, Han Fei arrived at the Sea of Strange Beasts first. When the Emperor Sparrow saw Han Fei, he seemed a little aggrieved. The Emperor Sparrow said, "There was a piece of good news and a piece of bad news. Which do you want to hear?" Han Fei said, "Good news. The bad news I heard today is really bad." The Emperor Sparrow tilted his head. "The good news is that the divine beasts have surrendered. Part of the reason is that they know that the doomsday is coming. Between surrendering to me and waiting for death, they naturally chose to surrender." Yes. Swish. In the blink of an eye, the distanceless gate appeared beside Han Fei, and a line of words instantly appeared on it. "You're back?" Han Fei said, "Isn't that obvious? I'm already standing here. Can you send the Emperor Sparrow to the first battlefield?" "Yes, but don't go now." "Oh? Why?" The distanceless gate liked to fight the ominous the most. As long as someone wanted to fight the ominous, he would definitely send them there without any delay. However, this was the first time Han Fei had seen the distanceless gate refuse to send people to the ominous battlefield. Words appeared on the distanceless gate. "The conditions there don't allow large-scale breakthroughs, or the ultimate war will be triggered in advance. Can you think of a way in the rear?" Han Fei said, "I'm thinking about it. By the way, can you go to the Soul Sea?" "Yes. A long time ago, I often went to the Bloodline Divine Tree, but I don't dare to go now. If I go there, I might not be able to come back." "Okay, got it. Go about your business. If I want to go anywhere during this period of time, you have to open the door for me. On call." Seeing the distanceless gate run away with a swish, Han Fei sighed slightly. The once arrogant distanceless gate was also panicking now. However, this also meant that the situation on the first battlefield was probably extremely bad. 800 years. Han Fei sighed. The time left for him was really ridiculously short. Han Fei felt tremendous pressure. He finally knew what pressure was. In the next moment, Han Fei felt a cool hand holding his hand. Han Fei couldn't help but turn his head, only to see Shiman Linglan looking at him with a smile. "This is not your business alone after all. This is the business of the entire sea of stars. Just try your best. Even if you can't do it, no matter what the road ahead is, I will accompany you and never abandon you." Han Fei knew that Shiman Linglan was comforting him. He swept away the worry between his eyebrows. "You do have to accompany me. You have to accompany me to rule the world." Han Fei looked at the Emperor Sparrow. "Say goodbye to the divine beasts and ferocious beasts. We're leaving the old site of the chaotic divine race." Han Fei came to the divine vine. This divine vine didn't seem to have changed since last time. Although Qiu Wanren and the others had warned him not to shake the divine vine by force, at this moment, Han Fei didn't care. All the races were going to be gone. Not only had this guy swallowed countless luck, but he also didn't have any reaction at all. What was the use of having you Han Fei raised his hand and slashed at the divine vine with the power of a sea-quelling god. However, this terrifying power was blocked by an invisible barrier 10 meters away. In an instant, the power of heaven and earth surged back and immediately pressed at Han Fei, as if angry that Han Fei had touched a treasure of heaven and earth without authorization. But Han Fei didn't stop. He shouted, "Immortal slaying knife." The characteristic of the immortal slaying knife was to extract the power of heaven and earth. Therefore, Han Fei slashed out this knife to compete with the heavens, vowing to cut the divine vine. However, in the next moment, Han Fei seemed to see the phantom of the boundless starry sky behind the divine vine. Bang! In an instant, terrifying energy crushing half of the heavenly palace of the chaotic divine race, and blasted Han Fei billions of kilometers away in the blink of an eye. Puff! 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 Halfway through, Han Fei's invincible state was completely broken. As early as when his invincible state was broken by the sea-quelling god, Han Fei knew that his invincible state was not really invincible. It had an upper limit. And now, with the power of a sea-quelling god, he was still crushed in an instant when he used the invincible body. Han Fei seriously suspected that the instantaneous explosive power might have reached the Dominator level. And this was just the counterforce. At this moment, Han Fei's body was cracked and dripping with blood. Surrounded by the divine brilliance of life, he quickly healed his injuries. Swish, swish. Shiman Linglan and Qiu Wanren arrived one after another. Shiman Linglan looked nervous. "Are you okay? This method obviously doesn't work. Don't try again." As soon as Qiu Wanren arrived, he looked at the ancient divine vine and then at Han Fei, lost for words. "Are you crazy? This thing is connected to the void and is protected by the law of the heavenly Tao. What conditions do you have? Do you want to cut it off? It's already good enough that you didn't die on the spot." "Bah!" Han Fei spat. "I was just trying." Qiu Wanren was lost for words. "Although the situation is serious now, you can't do anything rash. Don't do such a stupid thing again." Han Fei came to the divine vine again in the blink of an eye. This time, 8 small vines extended from between his eyebrows. Han Fei said, "Absorb. It's better to give the luck of these 6 lineages to me than to you." Swish. 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 8 small vines clasped the divine vine at the same time. Immediately, the divine vine began to tremble slightly, trying to stop the demon purification pot. Between the 2 vines, there were 2 strange powers from the heavens and earth competing with each other, completely crushing the heavenly palace. Fortunately, the 20 billion humans in the lower world were sealed separately. Otherwise, under this energy impact, these people probably wouldn't even know how they died. Han Fei's eyes glittered. "It's working." Han Fei could feel that a certain power was slowly being absorbed into his body. But this shouldn't be luck. After all, luck was something that couldn't be seen or touched. However, he guessed that the power that was attracted might have the possibility of transforming him. It was just like how Santian had been subtly transformed by the primordial purple gates back then. Han Fei said, "Linglan, accelerate the time here." "Okay." Han Fei thought for a moment, suddenly took out a black bead, and then crushed it. This was the agreement between him and the demon god. If he transcended the god-fiend body, he would tell the demon god the specific way With the demon god's comprehension ability, it shouldn't be difficult. What was difficult was to form a black hole with two spiritual heritages intertwined. However, he would call the demon god back first if the latter didn't go to the first battlefield. Although even if the demon god broke through to become a sea-quelling god, it wouldn't change anything. One more sea-quelling god was better than none. Then, Han Fei said, Elder Chiu, please continue to guard the sea realm. I'll come out when it's time. Chiu Wanren said, okay. Anyway, it's mostly up to you to save the Sea of Stars. It's up to you. Han Fei decided to give it a try. If this method worked and could support him to break through the Supreme Tao, it would be best. As for the 10th vine of the demon purification pot, Han Fei was not in a hurry, because he wanted the full set. When he had to get the 10th vine, he would definitely have to get the 9th vine too. And if he went to get the 9th vine, a war would definitely break out. 300 years passed in the blink of an eye. When Han Fei cultivated in seclusion for about 50 years, the demon god returned. He didn't go to the first battlefield but had been wandering in the chaotic sea. As a powerhouse comparable to a godslayer, he certainly knew that something had happened in the chaotic sea, so in addition to cultivating, he had been looking for some opportunities to make a breakthrough. He didn't rush back until Han Fei summoned him. However, Han Fei had no time to study the method of fusing the soul and the body with him. Instead, he directly told him the method and let him think of a way. In the past 300 years, Han Fei could feel that a special power was seeping into his flesh, spiritual heritage, bones, and soul. Although this power couldn't increase his strength, it was vaguely improving something. He knew that if he kept absorbing with the demon purification pot, he should be able to break through the supreme technique one day. However, it was too slow. This obscure improvement was really too slow. 300 years, after the acceleration of time, was as much as 150,000 years. But even after such a long time, it couldn't make him feel that he was about to make a breakthrough. Instead, it made him feel that he was about to settle down. Buzz. Han Fei immediately chose to put away the demon purification pot. Shiman Linglan had been cultivating with Han Fei and was provided with resources by Chiu Wanren. After all, the Sea of Stars was almost over, and Chiu Wanren no longer kept those resources to himself. Therefore, compared to Han Fei, Shiman Linglan had improved a lot. At this moment, seeing Han Fei stop, Shiman Linglan also stopped cultivating and hurriedly asked, "How is it? Can you make a breakthrough now?" Han Fei frowned. "No. This method works, but it's too slow. I don't have that much time. These 300 years have been wasted." "Then what should we do?" Han Fei said, "Linglan, I want to enter the path of reincarnation and take back the 10th vine of the demon purification pot." Shiman Linglan was a little surprised. The demon purification pot has 10 vines? Han Fei said, "This is a secret that few people know. I don't know if it's useful to take back the 10th vine, but now I can only try." Shiman Linglan said firmly, "I'll go with you." Han Fei said, "No, I can definitely return from this path. You shall still be cultivating here. At this time, every time we become stronger, we will have more power. And taking back the vine is just a gamble. If this method doesn't work, I still have one last bet, so this time, you can just cultivate here." However, Shimin Linglan shook her head and said, "The strong masters in the sea of stars don't lack my little bit of combat power. Even if I continue to cultivate for another 500 years, so what? It's impossible for me to use these 500 years to advance to the Dominator realm. If there's only so little time left for the myriad races in the Sea of Stars, I don't want to leave you." Seeing Shimin Linglan's determined expression, Han Fei knew that she was stubborn. His heart warmed. "Okay, let's go together." Buzz. The green jade stone bridge appeared, and Han Fei took Shimin Linglan's hand and said, "Let's go." When the two of them came to the bridge, Shimin Linglan felt the scene in front of her change. 100,000 long lines, billions of creatures, and countless races were crossing the bridge. Under the bridge, on both sides of the road, hellfire was burning, and countless screams came. They were remnant souls that were being purified by hellfire. Is this the path of reincarnation? Shimin Linglan was shocked. She had never seen so many dead people. The marching team was full of remnant souls that had lost their minds. They moved forward numbly, giving people a very depressed feeling. Shimin Linglan said, "So this is what happens when a person dies." Han Fei smiled. "It's the cycle of life and death. This is the way, teacher. Created for the continuation of the fire seed for all races. Let's go. From now on, don't let go of my hand. Come, jump into the river with me." Clash. The two of them landed in the river of laws. Shimin Linglan clearly felt the turbulence of her long river of life, but Han Fei had been protecting it. She couldn't help but smile. She hadn't felt this feeling of being protected for many years. Han Fei held Shimin Linglan's hand and walked up against the flow. Han Fei had never tried it before, nor did he have the time to try it. Now that he really tried it, he found that moving in the river of laws was also very difficult, which made Han Fei feel that he was in the river of eternal darkness, and he was even moving more slowly than in the river of eternal darkness. If he didn't activate his original Great Tao, Han Fei could travel 100 kilometers in 1 second. If he activated his original Great Tao, he could travel tens of thousands of kilometers in 1 second. This was because he wasn't just going in the opposite direction. He had to contend with all the laws. Although these laws wouldn't hurt him, the scouring power of the laws was very strong, polishing him all the time. Han Fei didn't know whether to laugh or cry, because he discovered that this law scouring could deepen and strengthen his grasp of the laws. However, it was too late for him to discover this surprise. Han Fei couldn't help but sigh. He had been guarding this treasure mountain, but he didn't even know it. Otherwise, his growth speed would have been faster. Shimin Linglan was shocked again. With such surging power of laws, wouldn't it only take a few years to stack laws? Han Fei smiled. That's right. It took me 3 years to stack 100,000 laws. Shimin Linglan couldn't help but look at Han Fei bitterly. It took me more than 70,000 years. Ha ha ha. It's okay, it's okay. Time is no longer valuable in front of us. If we win against the ominous, we can have as much time as we want. The two of them walked hand in hand. Occasionally, they could talk about interesting things and say sweet nothings, but they never stopped walking. This journey lasted for more than 180 years. Several times, Han Fei wanted to give up, because he was not a sea-quelling god after all. He couldn't walk this path all the time with the power of a sea-quelling god. Although Shiman Linglan was a sea-quelling god, this river had restrictions on her. Once she used a powerful force, her laws would flow out. Therefore, Han Fei could only take her away, but she couldn't take Han Fei away. It wasn't that Han Fei wanted to waste time on these things now, but that what they pursued at their level was too mysterious and powerful. It was the greatest secret in this world. Therefore, when they came into contact with these things, they couldn't move fast at all. For example, if an immortal-level cultivator didn't have a special method to stack laws step by step, who wouldn't need hundreds of thousands of years to complete the law stacking? Except for Han Fei, who had the path of reincarnation and could walk hundreds of thousands of years of other people's path in 3 years, everyone else had to do that. Therefore, the time limit Han Fei set for himself was 200 years. If he couldn't find the 10th divine vine in 200 years, he could only give up. He couldn't waste all the time here. Fortunately, 180 years later, Han Fei and Shiman Linglan finally saw the end of the River of Laws. They saw the small vine floating in the spring. In addition to the small vine, they also saw a void filled with gray-black mist. That void seemed to have no end. And this river of laws flowed out of that void. Is this the source of chaos? The place where laws are born? In the books of the prophet, there was an extremely brief description of the source of chaos. It said that the source of chaos was the most primitive chaos, the source of the birth of the Sea of Stars, the source of power for all races in the Sea of Stars, and the foundation of the existence of this Sea of Stars. Apart from that, the books didn't record anything else about it. However, Han Fei had no time to pay attention to the source of chaos now. What he cared about was the 10th vine. Obviously, no one had been able to take this vine away since the chaotic era. Did Jiang Taichu know of its existence? He probably did. After all, even the ancient human of the lava giants knew. There was no reason for Jiang Taichu not to know. However, Jiang Taichu might not know that this vine was hidden here. And since Jiang Taichu, the path of reincarnation had disappeared, so no one knew that it was here. Han Fei was overjoyed to see the vine and even grateful. He had finally found it. When he saw the vine, Han Fei felt the anomaly of the demon purification pot. And the vine took the initiative to dance, as if it knew that someone was coming to pick it up. With Han Fei's understanding of the vine fruit, it was obviously ripe, which made him greatly relieved. It was good that it was ripe. If it was ripe, it meant that the vine itself was ripe. Besides, this was the legendary 10th vine, and it had already grown a fruit. Every vine of the demon purification pot always gave him a surprise. Everyone said that the demon purification pot was a peerless treasure that could suppress the ominous, so this fruit should be quite extraordinary. Han Fei immediately took out the demon purification pot and put it close to the fruit, only to see question marks. Yes, the demon purification pot, with 8 divine vines, couldn't see through the fruit, which made Han Fei frown. Shiman Linglan heaved a sigh of relief. The demon purification pot with 9 vines was already very powerful. Now that the 10th vine had appeared, it might really be possible to save the myriad races in the Sea of Stars. At this moment, the 10th vine began to take the initiative to return. However, as the 10th vine flew up, Han Fei and Shiman Linglan immediately felt that the flowing speed of the River of Laws increased, more than 30% faster than before. Furthermore, a crack appeared in the void of the chaotic source. On a closer Look, the roots of the 10th vine had already penetrated into the chaotic source. Through the crack, Hanfei vaguely saw a vast and boundless sea of stars, like a mist shining with various colors. Unfortunately, the crack disappeared too quickly. Hanfei asked, Linglan, did you see what was inside? Shiman Linglan hesitated and said, not very clearly. There seems to be rivers of stars flowing, but there are too many of them. It seems a little unreal. Countless rivers of stars flowing? There should be secrets hidden in the chaotic source, but now was not the time for him to pay too much attention to this. Even if there were secrets, he had no time to study them now. He could only try to find some information about the chaotic source after solving the current crisis of the Sea of Stars. At this moment, the 10th vine had already fused with the demon purification pot. The other 8 vines of the demon purification pot immediately shone with a strange luster. Even the demon purification pot itself was shining with divine light and spinning in midair. It didn't stop for half a day. Hanfei glanced at his information, but there was no change. When he looked at the fruit hanging on the 10th vine, the demon purification pot also only showed question marks. Hanfei didn't expect this. Was it because he wasn't strong enough, or was it because the demon purification pot deliberately didn't show him the information of the fruit? If even he couldn't see the effect of this fruit, then obtaining the 10th vine would only improve the demon purification pot's ability to deal with the ominous. It wouldn't have much substantive effect. Hanfei shook his head. There's nothing wrong with this fruit, but I don't seem to be qualified to use it now. Hanfei nodded. He suspected that he couldn't see the information of this fruit because he wasn't a real sea-quelling god. Anyway, so far, his expectations this time had failed. Shiman Linglan asked, could it be because there is still a small vine that hasn't returned? Hanfei said, it's possible. It seems that we have to fight this battle in the end. Hanfei's original plan was that if he could break through to the Dominator realm, he would be more confident in dealing with the Eternal Race. If he couldn't break through to the Dominator realm, he could fight the Eternal Race after the crisis on the first battlefield was solved, provided that the 10th vine of the demon purification pot could directly solve it. But now, not only had he failed to make a breakthrough with the supreme technique after spending nearly 500 years on it, but the 10th vine he had been looking forward to for a long time also didn't bring him a surprise. It did disappoint him. Shiman Linglan suddenly sighed. The same things always happen. Huh? What do you mean? Shiman Linglan smiled. Do you remember when we were in the Grand Myriad Mountains? The sea demons invaded, the route was cut off, and the Huma powerhouses and the Grand Myriad Mountains faced the enemy with all our strength. At that time you were only in the law enforcer realm, but you had still joined this chaotic battle. Now, although times have changed, it seems that crises always occur, never giving us a chance to catch our breath. Hanfei couldn't help but recall that time. Yes. The sea demons at that time were like the ominous to them now. Hanfei smiled. That's true. I wasn't afraid at that time. Now I've grown to this point. How can I be afraid of war? Let's go. Since trickery doesn't work, let's fight. Buzz. When Hanfei and Shiman Linglan reappeared at the old site of the chaotic divine race, the divine vine was still fine, but when the two of them appeared, a barrier appeared around the divine vine. Obviously, Han Fei forcibly absorbed his power last time, making the divine vine instinctively resist him. Heh. Just because I can't kill you now doesn't mean I can't kill you in the future. From now on, it can only be me who takes the luck of the 6 lineages. You're really angry. It seems that this trip didn't go well? Han Fei smiled and said, nothing goes smoothly in this world. Elder Qiu, do you know the drawbacks of the Tao of Pure Soul? Qiu Wanren raised his eyebrows. Are you going to attack the eternal race? Han Fei nodded. This is the last solution. I need luck, the demon purification pot's fine, and I don't want the eternal race to threaten us. Therefore, I have to fight and win this battle. Qiu Wanren's expression immediately became solemn. After thinking for a moment, he said, the Tao of Pure Soul is too extreme. The higher you cultivate, the more ruthless you become. Having no body is their strength, but also their weakness. The source power is a new power born from the fusion of soul power and power. Without a body, there is no source of power. Once the strong masters of the eternal race want to be stronger, such as breaking through to the sea-quelling God realm, they have to have a body. Otherwise, it's impossible for them to give birth to source power with their soul bodies alone. Therefore, anyone above the sea-quelling God level in the eternal race still has a body. But where did their bodies come from? The body they casually condensed can't carry their powerful power. Therefore, when the eternal race reaches the God realm or the God-slaying level, they have to start condensing a body for themselves. And there are 2 ways to condense it. One is similar to refining weapons and nurturing puppets. Through a long period of time, one nourishes a soulless body and repeatedly strengthens it until it can carry their soul body. Basically, once the body is nurtured, the God-slaying level eternal race will be qualified to enter the sea-quelling God level. Han Fei's heart stirred. So, the God-slaying level is a peak of the Tao of Pure Soul? Qiu Wanren nodded. All these years, I've been studying the eternal race. The myriad races in the infinite ocean all have the same body structure. Although the eternal race is special, it's impossible for them to completely escape the life forms of the myriad races in the infinite ocean. No matter which race it is, it's not easy for them to have a sea-quelling God. Otherwise, the eternal race would have long unified the myriad races. But it's undeniable that they definitely have a lot of gods and God-slaying level powerhouses. How long has it been since the primordial era? I'm afraid countless people have had their divine tribulation fruits snatched by the eternal race. They didn't dare to really attack the myriad races, mainly because they don't have enough peak combat power like sea-quelling gods and dominators. Han Fei said, in front of a real powerhouse, gods are like ants. Even if they have many gods, so what? Qiu Wanren couldn't help but say, more importantly, they have been lying low for too long. In such a long time, they can always nurture some sea-quelling gods. They must also have more than one dominator. Otherwise, wouldn't your 3 temples have long wiped out the eternal race? But they won't have many dominators, right? Shiman Linglan said, there have always been cries for the overthrow of the eternal race in our 3 temples. In the past, we didn't dare to touch the eternal race because of the bloodline divine tree. Now that the path of reincarnation has appeared, if it weren't for the ominous invasion, we should be able to resolve it with the 3 temples working together. Qiu Wanren shook his head slightly. But you haven't tried it in the end. Besides, if the other party really has many god-level powerhouses, it's hard to say if they will be driven to desperation. It's not impossible for them to cause chaos in the sea realm. Han Fei said, "Don't worry. Since I've taken action, I don't care how many gods they have." Qiu Wanren couldn't help but look sideways at him. "I really can't imagine how many trump cards you can use." Han Fei smiled. "There are indeed many top powerhouses trapped on the first battlefield, but this doesn't mean that all the strong masters are trapped." "How is the demon god now?" Qiu Wanren looked in the direction of the Sea of Stars. "He should be preparing to make a breakthrough. This person is quite extraordinary. I don't know where he got an ancient Tao seed. If he can fuse with it, it's certain that he will become a sea-quelling god, a very strong one." Han Fei didn't think it was surprising. The demon god is a person who had created the god-fiend formless technique and forcibly turned himself into a cultivator with dual spiritual heritages, clearing an almost impossible path. Naturally, he couldn't be simple. Han Fei called him back, because he had high hopes for the demon god. Although he was just a sea-quelling god, it was not easy to have a sea-quelling god. Whether it was Senior Brother Azure Dragon, 5th Senior Brother, Senior Sister Dark Shadow, Senior Brother 6 God, or Senior Brother Lei Hung, which one of them didn't spend a long time at the peak of the great monarch realm to advance to the sea-quelling god in one fell swoop? Without special opportunities, it was almost impossible for ordinary people to reach this realm. Han Fei said, "Elder Qiu, help me tell him that I can't wait long. 100 years is my limit. Tell him to make a breakthrough within 100 years. Han Fei said, "I'm going to meet the death god." Shiman Linglan was about to speak, when Han Fei looked at her and said, "No. I'll take you with me." Shiman Linglan smiled. This was exactly what she wanted to say. Old distanceless. Swish. The distanceless gate arrived in an instant, so fast that it seemed to be right beside him. Han Fei said, "To the Immortal Temple." Han Fei didn't know where the Immortal Temple was, but he didn't need to know. The distanceless gate would take him there.